working. Okay, thank you. Okay, we are going to begin, everybody. This is a regular meeting of the Montclair Zoning Board of Adjustment. Notice has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act by posting a copy of the notice on the first floor of the municipal building and sending a copy to the Montclair Times, Star Ledger, and Herald News. This is a public hearing in which any members of the public are welcome to attend. The meeting agenda is available on the Montclair website and as is a link to the township's YouTube channel where the hearing can be viewed live or after the fact. The hearing is also being televised on channel 34. And we will take a roll call, starting on the other side of the room. Mr. McCullough.
Here.
Mr. Caulfield.
Here.
Ms. Harris.
Here.
Mr. Church.
Here.
Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Mr. Moore.
Present.
Mr. Vieira.
Here.
Mr. Sullivan.
Here.
Okay. We have the minutes of the meeting on September 20th. I have a couple of changes. On page 3, line 6, it should say the board questioned the applicant and the architect. And then on page 4, line 13, first word, there's a typo in Mr. Marin's name. And then on line 35, there's, towards the end of the line, there's a typo in the word "the." And then on page 5, we should delete the 5th condition since it's been determined that it's, and I would, otherwise I'd have to be rewriting it, and it was a little book. Any other changes to those minutes? If not, would someone like to move them with those changes?
I'll make the motion to move the minutes with the changes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any no? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. Then we have the resolution for the Bryant application on Woodmont Road. I don't have any changes to that resolution. Does anyone else have any changes? If not, someone want to move the resolution?
I'll so move, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
Okay. And then we have the resolution for the Lexington Avenue property. And I have a couple changes. On page 2, the last line of the 5th findings, change recommended to acceptable. And then on page 3, again, delete the 5th condition.
Which word are we changing in that last line? Condition 5?
Changing recommended to acceptable.
Recommended, okay. And the condition as same as the minutes.
Okay. The first application is that of Anne Marie Gauntlett for, well, I didn't do a motion. I was.
That's
Someone wanna
moved by
move the
Mr. Church.
resolution? I'm trying to move things along at home.
I'll move the resolution.
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstentions?
Now, Mr. Caulfield, he had voted against the application, and did Mr. Church.
So we need new,
Yes. So we'll need either Mr. McCullough and Mr. Vieira.
I'll move the approval of the
Second.
resolution with the corrections.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
An
And
abstention
any
includes
abstentions?
Mr. Caulfield, Ms. Harris, Mr. Church. Did I miss anybody? No. And Mr. Moore is abstaining from that resolution. Thank you.
First application is that of Anne Marie Gauntlett. It's for property at 176 Walnut Street. It's the application for site plan and conditional use approvals to use the property as a 5-family dwelling. Applicant proposes to make various improvements to the property, including parking and driveway improvements, installations of a new walkway, and a code-compliant trash enclosure. The property is located in the OR-3 Garden Apartment and Office Building Zone, is designated on the township tax maps as Block 2306 and Lot 20. In addition to site plan approval, the applicant has also applied for variance from the conditional use standard in Montclair Code Section 347-54B1 to permit dwelling units with less than 800 square feet of floor area, a variance from conditional use standard Montclair Code Section 347-54B2 to permit a multifamily dwelling to occupy 31.5% of the property, whereas the ordinance provides that a principal building may not occupy more than 25% of the property. A variance from the conditional use standard of Montclair Code Section 347-54B4 to permit a multifamily dwelling on a property with a lot area of 6,442 square feet, whereas the ordinance requires a minimum lot area of 15,000 square feet, and a variance from the conditional use standard of Montclair Code Section 347-54B5 to retain the existing unenclosed fire escape, whereas the ordinance requires fire escapes to be enclosed, and a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-101 to permit 7 on-site parking spaces, whereas the ordinance requires 9 spaces. Are taxes in order? Is the notice-
Property taxes.
Taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Yes. Property taxes are current, and a proof of publication was received, publication of the notice, that is, and also proof of the mailing of the notice was also received from the applicant.
Okay. Mr. Tremblay, want to give your appearance and proceed?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, Alan Tremblay, appearing on behalf of the applicant Anne Marie Gauntlett. I thought it was lit. Still can't get this. Property's on the north side of Walnut Street between Park and Midland Avenue, and it's directly adjacent to the 5-story Midland apartment building located at the corner of Midland and Walnut. The application is for site plan approval to convert the 3-family building to a 5-family building. Although, as you'll find out, using the word conversion might not be appropriate. It's more or less to legitimize a use that has existed on this property for probably in excess, at least 20 years and probably longer. The property is located in the OR3 Garden Apartment and Office Building Zone, which allows for multifamily use, allows for existing buildings, residential buildings to be converted to more than two family use, subject to certain conditions enumerated in the ordinance. We don't comply with all of the requirements for conditional use approval, and consequently, we're seeking, as part of this approval, several D3 conditional use variants, which our expert planner will address in his testimony. We also need a density variance and a parking deficiency variance. Somewhat of an unusual application. The zoning for this property is currently a legal 3-family building based on a variance that was granted by this board way back in 1956. As you'll hear from my client in a few minutes, at the time she purchased this property in 2003, it was being used at that time, apparently for some lengthy period of time, we don't know for sure, as a 5-unit building. She purchased it, the understanding that it was based upon the information she had, that it was that the use of the building as a five-family was legally permitted. And she found out otherwise about 20 years after she purchased the property, when she was cited for a code violation in 2022. So essentially, as I said, although the application is phrased as a permission to convert, we're essentially seeking the board's approval to legitimize the use of this building as a five-family dwelling, the same use that has existed for, at least 20 years and probably longer. So I have three witnesses to present. First witness will be my client sitting to my right. And then we have Jackson Bangs from Sionis Architecture filling in for Paul Sionis, who's out in California, spending time with his newly born grandson about 5 days ago. So Jackson's filling in for Paul. And then finally, we have George Williams provide planning testimony in support of the variances and other relief we're seeking. So having said that, unless the board has any questions of me at this time, I would call my first witness, Anne Marie Gauntlett.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Anne Marie, last name Gauntlett, 135 Grove Street, Montclair, New Jersey.
And Mr. Sharoon, raise your right hand. Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and position with the township.
Richard Sharoon, Planning Technician and Zoning Officer in the Planning Department.
All right, Ms. Gauntlett, how long have you lived in Montclair, by the way?
I bought my 135 Grove Street dwelling over 25 years ago.
Okay, and you're the current owner of property at 176 Walnut Street?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
And how long have you owned that property?
Over 20 years.
Okay. Purchased it around 2003, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. When you purchased the property in 2003, how was it being utilized?
The Caldwell banker, when I saw the listing for it, I was called about it, that they had something in town. It showed on the MLS listing that it was a five-family. Showed on the advertisement, and when I walked through, I saw the five different apartments that were included.
Okay. So it was listed and advertised for sale as a five-family unit
Yes.
building. What, if anything, did you do to verify that the building could legally be utilized as a five-family?
When I saw the MLS listing that they gave me, it showed the rents on there, that I assumed that it was completely legal in the way they advertised it with what was in the MLS listing.
Okay. Was there anything else that you reviewed or came upon that led you to believe that the property could properly be used as a five-family?
I thought it was completely fine, and I didn't call the town. No.
Okay. All right. Did you at some point obtain a copy of a certificate of registration or some other document confirming that the property had been registered with the Department of Community Affairs?
Yes, that's located inside. I run a nursing home during the day up in Paramus, Care One, and so I run it just like the nursing facility. So I made sure that the documents were located in the front lobby, that the Community Affairs was called, and I let them know that I was a new owner, and did they want to come through and make sure everything was fine, so that everything was legit. I don't need that, along with being a nursing home administrator, any type of issues to come up under my license.
So did you, before you purchased a closed title on the property, did you see a certificate of registration?
Yes, it
In-
says
in the
five.
building?
Yes, it says 5 on it.
Okay, so you reviewed that, it was posted in the building?
Correct.
All right, and that indicated that it was registered as a five-family with the Department of Community Affairs?
Yes.
Okay. Did you do anything else to determine whether the use was permitted? Did you contact the town or anything like that?
No, I didn't think I needed to. I took it as face value, since it's being advertised as such.
And not only that, you had seen this certificate. Did you think that
Correct.
that
It said 5 on it, it still does, and DCI,
Okay,
it's
all
located
right.
there.
So you relied upon that in thinking that it was legally permissible to continue to use the property as a 5-family?
Correct.
Okay, and you now know that that's not correct?
Correct.
Okay. So after you completed the purchase of the property in 2003, did you continue to utilize the property in the same manner as it had been used by the prior owner?
Yes, I didn't make any difference in the changes in the apartments or anything like that at all.
Okay. And did you also contact Department of Community Affairs after you purchased the property in order to change the registration for the building into your name?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And have you continued to have the property registered with Department of Community Affairs as a 5-family since you purchased it?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And does the Department of Community Affairs periodically come out to inspect the building?
Yes, I do.
Do you know how often they do that?
Every 5 years?
Okay. And have you had all of your 5-year inspections?
Yes, I have.
And have you passed all those inspections?
Yes, I have.
Do you recall when the last inspection was?
It would be a few years now because of COVID, so it's been over 3 years. It would have been right probably before COVID.
Okay. And what's the purpose of those inspections, if you know, from your experience?
They tell me to, that any multi-dwelling, it is something that I have to do, and that because of the dwelling situation, that anything over the 3 apartments in Montclair requires that there be a DCA inspection.
And is that to check for safety and code compliant issues and things of that sort,
Oh,
as you
they-
understand it?
Because I run the nursing facility, it's kind of understanding NFPA, going through the federal government or state legislatures, things that we have to do as far as the nursing facility. Like I said, I run it the same way, fire retardancy, doing any of the doors, having hardwired exit signs, smoke detectors, having them run through and make sure that the fire escape is in working order every year, things of that nature. I just run it the same way as I would the nursing facility. So they were very happy with everything that I was doing when they come out.
Okay. And the reason we're here tonight, correct me if I'm wrong, is because at some point you received a code violation from the town of Montclair. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell us when that occurred?
That would be about 2 years ago, and someone, I was renting the apartment from Gail Winston. Gail always did the rentals in town and for me, and she had placed it on Craigslist for it to be rented, and I got a call saying, from the town saying that they wanted to inspect the apartment.
And did you speak with the code enforcement officer?
Yes, I set up an appointment and had him come through, not knowing that anything was wrong.
Did he tell you how it came to his attention that the property might be in violation of the zoning code?
Yes, he told me that he saw it on Craigslist.
That he reviews listings on Craigslist periodically?
He goes through, and that's how he finds violations in town online, is during, that he goes through and looks online to see apartments on Craigslist.
Okay. So he came out, inspected, determined that there was a violation in his opinion,
Correct.
issued the notice, and sometime thereafter, you hired me to file this application.
Yes,
And we're
yes.
finally here.
I didn't
Okay.
really know what to do, so I called you, and I didn't rent it, and just decided the process to find out what was wrong. I
Okay,
really didn't know what was wrong.
okay. I'm going to ask you some questions about how the property is currently utilized, or the various apartments. But before I do that, I just want to ask a question about the fire escape that's on the side of the building. Can you tell us when that was installed, or approximately when it was installed?
Probably about 6 months to a year after I purchased.
Okay, and can you explain the circumstances as to why you had the fire escape installed?
I think what was happening before, when DCA would come through or anyone, is there's a door in between 2 apartments, and they were using that as their means of egress, for the 2 means of egress. So when I took over, I had the door, but we had some conversation around it when the person that comes through to approve it, He recommended for me to put a fire escape on it, and I went ahead and decided that was the best option, to keep everything up and up, to make sure that it was legal as far as putting putting the fire escape on and having 2 means of egress for each apartment. I also put in order for us to get the building approved, or the building permit approved, we changed all of the windows. They have special windows that are on the property that are adjacent to the fire escape, and anything that the town asked, we put in place with the fire escape when it was put on.
Okay. You mentioned that there was a door that you had installed, or?
It was there. It's always been there. It was just, I believe they left it open when someone walked through to inspect.
And what floor was that door on?
That's on the 3rd floor.
Okay. So the concern that was expressed was about having 2 means of egress from the 3rd floor, is that right?
Right. Everything else has 2 means of egress in
Okay.
the building.
So the fire escape was installed to provide 2 means of egress from the 3rd floor units, and that was
Yes.
at the request of the DCA or
Yes,
suggestion?
we talked about it, and he said I would recommend you putting it on, as it wouldn't really be legal the way it is with the door closed, and so I put it on.
Okay. And did you apply for building permits from the town in order to install that
Yes,
fire
I did.
escape? Okay. And did the town issue permits?
Yes.
And did the town conduct inspections after the fire escape was installed?
Yes.
And the permits were closed out, I
Correct.
assume? Okay. All right. I'd like you to discuss the 5 dwelling units in the building, and you've indicated that you haven't made any changes in the configuration of the units since you purchased the property.
Correct.
Correct? Okay. So tell us where each of the 5 apartments is located in the building, and as you're doing that, you might indicate the number of bedrooms in each apartment, starting with the 1st floor.
Sure. The 1st floor has 3 apartments in it, also a sunroom and a dining room.
3 bedrooms.
3 bedrooms, I'm sorry. 3-bedroom, dining room, sunroom, and Corinne has been there for over 10 years, and that takes over the 1st floor. The 2nd
So
floor.
that's the whole 1st floor is the one?
The whole 1st floor
Okay.
is one apartment.
Okay.
And then the 2nd floor has 2 apartments, one called 2R and one 2L. And each one of those has 1 bedroom. And Diane actually came with the building. She's been there for over 35 years in the building. She came with the house. And and she has the porch in the front, and then the 1-bedroom dining room and living room. On the other side, to the left, is a 1-bedroom, a living room, and then a kitchen. And
Okay.
then the 3rd floor has, each one of those has a 1-bedroom and bathrooms, and no cooking facilities, but has just a small kitchen.
Okay, so 2 1-bedroom units on the 3rd floor?
Yes.
Okay. And how are each of the units accessed?
Through the front door for the 1st and the 2nd floor, and also the 3rd floor in the front. And then in the back, you can actually, through the back door, you can hit all the apartments. You can get entry into all of them.
Well, 5.
I should say, I apologize, 4 of them, because the 3rd floor front, you can only get in through the front door.
Okay, all right, so everyone else who parks in the rear of the building is able to enter from the rear, except for the 3rd floor apartment in the
Yes, I'm
front?
sorry, yes, correct.
Okay. All right, and how many parking spaces do you currently have on the property?
I have 6.
Okay.
There's 2, and then 2 more, so there's 6
Okay.
altogether.
And do you have tandem parking spaces currently? Where cars park in front of each other, one car parks in front of another?
Yes, so apartment 1 has 2 spaces, but there's only 1 car. She lives alone, so she has 2 spaces. And then on the 2nd floor, on 2 left, they have a space. And then I have 3 in the front, which they have a space, and which don't have a car. And then 3 in the back, there's no one renting that. So there's more than enough spaces that are there.
Okay. Now, so
And I
it's,
also rent space.
calm down a minute. So it sounds as though you manage the parking in terms of assigning and telling people where they're allowed to park, basically assigned spaces.
Assigned spaces, and it comes with their rental agreement.
Okay, all right, all right. And you started to mention that you have spaces available to you on another property in the neighborhood?
I have an agreement with Sumner Associates, Park Street, on 80 Park Street. We've had it for probably since 2012, that I have another parking space that's across the street that I always wanted to do for visitors or anybody else that was staying overnight, something like that. There was a parking space, so that's Karen across at Sumner Associates. So I rent a space from her, and we've always kept that agreement, so that if anybody needs it, it's there.
That building at 80 Park Street, correct me if I'm wrong, is at the corner of Park and Walnut?
Yes.
Okay. And the parking lot that you're referring to for that building, which I assume is behind the building?
It's right in, it's to the side, so here's their building, here's their parking, and then here's my house.
Okay, but do you enter the parking lot from Walnut or Park Street?
From Walnut.
Okay.
It's right across from my house,
All right, so it's right, that's what I was getting at, proximity to
Yes.
your house. Okay.
right across.
So you've had the ability to, rent a parking space or more
Yes,
from her?
Karen, whatever I need, we can do a garage, or I can do overnight parking with her. We've always had that, because I always wanted to make sure if they had a visitor or somebody else or something going on, and we just became friends and had another parking space.
And that arrangement, has that arrangement existed for roughly the entire time that you've owned the property?
Yes.
Okay. Does she rent the spaces to other properties in
She
that neighborhood?
does.
Okay.
Midland Ave next door, I had Joy who was over there. That's how I found out about it, and we started talking. She rents spaces over there as well, because they don't have enough parking at the apartment building. So
Okay.
she parked a few
Okay.
people there.
And the building at 80 Park Street, correct me if I'm wrong, I know the building. I mean, it's basically a small office, a
Right.
house converted to a small office building.
Correct, it's hers,
Okay.
Karen's.
So is it fair to say, based upon your observation, that the parking spaces there are utilized during business hours, but available otherwise during evening hours and on weekends?
Correct.
Okay. How many spaces would you be permitted to rent from Karen if you needed to?
I confirmed with her today, just to make sure if I needed 3 or more, that I can have those, and she's downsizing her house, so she wants to give me back the garage as well, so then they don't have to move at all. If they have the garage, nobody needs to move during the day at all.
Okay. What is the most number of spaces you've ever had to utilize in that parking lot across the street in order to meet the parking requirements of your tenants?
Only one,
You've never had
Never.
the need for more than one?
no.
Okay. And do you pay a fee for renting the parking
I
space?
do.
Okay. All right, and there's a written agreement, am I correct, that she typically utilizes?
Yes.
Okay. And did you say you spoke with her recently in preparation for this meeting to confirm that, she's prepared to continue this arrangement?
The only reason I called her is because I haven't rented the apartment. I've been paying her all along, and she said to stop paying her. I said, why aren't you cashing the checks? And she said, you're not parking there. I said, but I don't want to lose the spot. And she said, you don't have to do that, Anne Marie. So she put in writing, and I sent it to you, just so you could see, whenever you need it, Anne Marie, it's there, whatever you need. But we haven't rented the apartment, so I hadn't needed it.
All right. I'm marking this document that I'm about to show you as Exhibit A1. Is this the form of parking agreement that she's utilized and had people sign?
Yes.
Okay. Gonna get off of this as Exhibit 1. I've got A1. think, I just wanted to ask you some questions based upon a couple of comments in the memo we received from the planning department. And also maybe one comment relating to the engineer's report. Have you had any problems for the 20 years or so you've owned the property with any flooding or drainage issues on the property?
No, when I bought the house, I put a new roof on it, new gutters, as well as, just because I know all of that from being in nursing facilities, what needed to be done with the boilers and the heaters, and so I changed out all of the gutters and had special gutters with special soffits put so they drain away from the building, and you'll see that in the front and on the side, so that they drain away, but I've never had any pooling or anything like that.
Okay, and does water typically drain, sort of down the driveway to the street?
Never
Yeah.
had an issue, even when we had that really
Okay.
bad rainstorm, nothing at all in the
Okay.
basement.
Oh, okay. The planner also, the planner in his report, assistant planner, former assistant planner, noted that there were some chain link fences, and I think he wasn't sure whether they were on your property or adjoining property. Are any of the chain link fences yours?
No, I upgraded the fence that is mine, all the beige that's enclosed, just for appeal's sake, is all mine. The chain link is the people next door.
All right, so as far as you know, there's no chain link fencing on your property?
None of it's mine.
Okay. And can you tell us, how do you handle snow removal? How have you handled snow
Sure.
removal? And I assume you expect to continue to handle it going forward.
Yeah, I have a landscaper for my house and for 176. What we do is, because of the longer driveway, what we do is we back drag. So we go in and then pull out for any snow, and then they do it by hand with snow blowers.
Okay, so it's not piled on the property
Nope.
anywhere?
And we
Really?
also have a space where we can put that, is if we do have a large snow, which we've had before, over near where the receptacles for garbage are, there's no cars there.
Okay, all right. So you're going to continue that arrangement, and again, you haven't had any issues in the
No,
past?
even with the large winter storms, no, from years ago.
Okay. All right. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, Ms. Gauntlett. Just a couple of questions for clarification. So you purchased the property in 2003, and you said that it was around 2020, 2021 when you were made aware of a code violation.
Right.
Were there any interim times in between those years when there were any notices of code violations?
No, nothing.
When you decided to install the fire escape,
Right.
and I think, based on your comments, you went through the proper procedures and you got the necessary permits, and so the inspector apparently only looked at it through the lens of the fire escape itself, didn't look at it as a 5-unit property or anything like that. Would that be correct?
They did walk through, they were in the basement, and then they walked through the front to see where the bolts would be, because I had to open up all of the siding for these long bolts that needed to be put in. They wanted to see how that was all done, so I had to leave it all open for them when they came back again. They came back twice to look at all of how that was actually attached to the building. For load test, I think they call it, they wanted to make sure. So they were up in the front, through the stairwells, and to the back.
So there might have been an opportunity at that time to note if there was a violation of some sort and to call that to your attention, but that did not occur.
I would believe, right. They did go to the third-floor apartments because that's where the special wire is as well. So each one of those apartments has special windows with the fire, or with the crisscrosses of what they wanted, and I actually had to replace another one that they didn't like on the first floor as well. So they were in the apartments.
Okay, thank you. So when you were looking at this property for purchase, were you looking for 5-family or more?
No, it was out of the blue. It was Dag who, she knew that I wanted another property because I love my 135 and something that I could walk to with the dog and take a look at it and make sure everything was fine. And so she called me and said that this gentleman, partners were selling, would I like to look at it? And I went in it, and so we just started talking, and I said, okay, I could do this.
Okay. And you noted, as you were looking at this property and making the decision for purchase, that it was a 5-family unit or a 5-tenant unit.
When I got the MLS listing, it does show with the rents on it, all 5. So I assumed and also with the advertisement, which I have still, that it shows that on there as well.
And were there 5 tenants at the time?
Yes.
There were. So consistently, it's been utilized that way through the
Yes,
years?
their handyman was
to your
living there at the
knowledge.
time as well.
And then you also indicated that it was because the property was referenced on Craigslist that triggered the code violation. What was it about this listing on Craigslist, do you know?
He just wrote a letter to me that I got, just saying that it has come to our attention that you might have a illegal apartment at 176 Walnut Street. That's what the letter said.
And the illegal apartment would have been which one?
The
Or
apartment that's open currently, the 3 rear, 3R.
so the 3rd floor? Rear. And did anything, what had to be done as far as that apartment was concerned, that particular unit, to satisfy the violation?
He said that I would have to take out the kitchen that's there, which is just basically I didn't change it, it's just counter space and cabinets and that kind of thing, and a refrigerator. He said, or you would have to decide whether you want to go for a variance.
So that's why you made a reference earlier that when you were describing the apartments, I think you made a comment about there were no cooking facilities?
Right, he told, and I knew that from him telling me that you can't have any type of what looks like a kitchen.
And is that the only unit on the 3rd floor that does not have any cooking, or the other unit also does not have any cooking facilities?
Doesn't have any cooking facilities.
So
no.
what do the tenants do?
One of them has, well, they both had, everybody's into air fryers now, so a lot of them are doing that. And the girl that lives on the other side, she's from New York, so she's never home, so she doesn't cook. She just has one of those little air fryers.
All right. Just on the, as far as the parking is concerned, so you mentioned that Sumner Associates across the street does provide parking, utilization of parking space. So what happens if they're no longer there? I mean, if they choose to sell their property for whatever reason, how would that sort of change the nature of your parking situation?
I have the funeral home next door. I know him as well, so I would be able to park over there. We've had that chat a couple times before.
So you see that as an alternative,
Yes,
a viable
and he does park
alter-
there. He has people that park there as well.
I see. And at the time that you purchased the property, from the time that you purchased the property to the present moment, has the parking situation for that building changed?
For my one?
Yes, in terms of the number of vehicles based on tenancy? And
Yeah, it's funny that people, I even find in the nursing facility, people don't have cars anymore. Like, they Uber. They don't have them, and I'm renting to a girl from Manhattan, she doesn't have a car. So it's never been an issue, and the 1-bedroom only has one person in it, so they don't, and plus they have 2 spots, I still give them 2. So it's never been an issue.
So that's why the space at Sumner Associates oftentimes sits vacant?
Correct, and that's why she said, why you keep sending me money? And I just said, well, I want to keep it, I don't want to lose it. And she said, you're not going to lose it.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. Those inspections are state inspections? Is that for the green cards of the building? Is that what?
That's,
what
I
it is?
believe it is.
That's-
It's green,
yeah.
so if that's what
So
it
that,
is.
it wasn't like the town's inspections, it was the state's inspections of the buildings, okay. When the person from Craigslist said that you might have an illegal apartment number 3R, was that the one being listed at the time?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Just so it's clear, when you said the person from Craigslist, wasn't the code enforcement
It's
officer?
code enforcement.
Saw the listing on
Yes.
on Craigslist?
Yes.
And he contacted you?
Correct.
That's the only way he found out? Nobody complained or anything?
No,
But
no
he saw
complaints.
the listing and thought?
I've never had a complaint.
That's what you said.
Yeah, okay, I just
Okay.
wanted to clarify
Yeah,
that.
I'm with you.
As to who
Yep.
reported it.
Yeah,
Thank
he
you.
told me that.
Yeah, thank you.
Ms. Harris?
I have no questions.
Mr. Church?
I have a question about the parking. The parking on the property, you say you have, how many spaces?
6.
On the property?
Yes. 2, and then 2 this way.
2 meaning what? 2 on, right behind the house?
Correct. Well, as you drive in the driveway,
Yep.
there's 2 here, and
Yep.
as you drive in, there's 2 here.
Head
So
on.
they're next to one another, 4.
Okay, let me ask you this. You have parking, you have parking privileges with 80 Park Street.
Yes.
How do those people get into your apartment or your property from 80 Park? Do they have to walk around?
No, they just have to walk across the street. 80 Park Street, where my house is right across the street from them. Their entryway is right where my house is.
Well, who, oh, I see, okay. 80 Park is the funeral parlor?
Right next to it. It's actually on the corner, Park and Walnut.
We say-
And the funeral facility is right in front of my house. That driveway, the driveway, here's my driveway, here's their driveway.
Yeah, it's right across
And
the
Park
street.
is right here. It's right next to it.
And you say you can accommodate, how many on your property? How many cars?
2, and 2, so 2, 4, 6.
That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Moore?
No questions.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a question around the basement. So how are the storage units used, or what's the, what do you use the basement for?
Sure. I don't allow them to really do a lot of storage. I always find that becomes an issue with people. So what I do is I do have storage for apartment 1 and apartment 2. I do not have storage for the upstairs attics. They have storage up there already. They have the attic space. So I don't allow anything on the floor, and I just keep it completely clean. So there isn't a problem of anything, also nothing in the hallways. So nothing's allowed to be in the hallways.
And then there's a laundry room that is,
I do. I have a coin-operated laundry room that's there for their use, and that's cleaned every 6 months by a company for the dryers. And that's all in code, making sure that that's fine. We've come through and changed the electric in that too, to make sure that everything's within code. New boilers, new water heaters, and they're all separated too. And
Thank
they have
you.
alarms on them.
yeah, thank you.
I have a number of questions. First, the parking requires the tenants to be out by 8 a.m. and not be in until 6. Has that ever been an issue?
No. I actually, if I'm renting to someone about it, I let them know about it. The last man that was with me for many, many years, he went to work. So it wasn't never an issue. They can park on the weekends, they can park after 6, and on holidays.
If we
That's one of the reasons I want the garage. That way, they never have to move.
Okay. if we approve this variance, will you install full kitchens on the third floor, or will it continue to be as it is now?
I'm going to leave it the way it is. And I haven't seen that as a problem for anybody. It actually lowers the rent, nobody has an issue with it, and no need to do it.
You talked about the stormwater drainage. How is it directed on the east side of the building?
East side would be on to the right.
Away from the driveway?
In the front, you'll see that I've extended the gutters to almost to, in the lawn area and moving along. So they're away from the house, they've been extended, and in the back, I've done the same thing.
But in the back, that's where the 2 parking spaces are going to be now.
Correct, but there's a lawn space behind where the house is that's not near the driveway. There's a lawn space back there, and I've extended it, so it goes away from the house. I noticed when I purchased the house that there was some, not pooling, but I saw something that was like water-related in the corner, so I moved the gutters away, so there wasn't any issue.
'Cause the plans are only showing a very narrow lawn area partially across the back of the house.
Probably don't have the best picture. You'll see some shrubbery behind the house. See, it's over here.
But that appears to be all being replaced by making 2 conforming parking spaces in that area.
It won't, because I wanted to make it maybe another patio area for them, something like that, behind the house. So it's under the kitchen of the first floor, so it's around the corner where that is. So it doesn't even hit that space at all.
Okay, I'll ask Mr. Bangs
Right.
about his plans.
Probably better asking him.
Okay, when, I'm trying to, so the code person saw the ad in Craigslist, said, did he cite you for a violation then?
Yes, he told me that he was going to write it, and you'll get it in the mail, and then you have to
And it was
decide
for,
what
and
you want to
it
do.
was for an illegal apartment, not for anything else, is that correct?
No, that was it.
Okay. When did you, was the fire escape installed before or after the notice of
Oh,
violation?
years, within me having the house within a year, so between 2003 and 2004, 5. I've had it that long.
Okay. And at that point, you also installed the fire-rated windows next to the fire escape to meet code requirements?
That was all requirement in order to have the, what I needed to have done, what they wanted from the town.
Mr. Chairman, I have a copy of the violation warning that was provided by the Code Enforcement Office. Just to correct the record, should I describe?
Yes.
What was issued to the owner, it's dated, January 14th, 2022, cites both third-floor apartments as an issue, not one. They might have started off with the one that was advertised. By the time the inspector saw the 2 apartments on the 3rd floor, both of those are considered an issue, being number 4 and 5 above the 3 that are,
The one's the 3rd floor.
yeah, the 3rd floor.
Okay, and the shed that's behind the 4 parking spaces, what is that used for?
Bikes. It's bikes, a snow blower if I needed something back there, and just materials for them to store anything for gardening. That's it.
Okay, and if those spaces are occupied by cars, how accessible is that?
You still have, there's space in between those 4 cars to be able to get through without a problem. I did take out 2 trees that were back there when I first purchased a very large tree that was back there. That's why the parking is much better, because it was just huge. And there was another tree all the way in the back as well. That shed stops them from going down the bank into the next parking lot. There's a little fence there. There's no pavement there at all.
I'll ask, I have some follow-up questions for Mr. Banks on what's happening back there. Okay, any other questions from board members? Are there any members of the audience who have questions for this witness? Okay, want to call your next witness?
Sure, thank you. Good job. Jackson Banks.
Mr. Banks, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Jackson Bangs, 8 Hillside Avenue, Montclair, New Jersey.
So Chairman, offering Jackson as a witness, expert in the field of architecture, we accept his qualifications based upon prior, you've testified before this board, haven't you?
Yes.
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 Thank you. All right, Mr. Banks, you worked on the site plan together with Paul Sionis in your office, is that right?
Yes.
Okay. I'd like you to just review the site plan for the board. Now, you prepared a typical Sionis architecture PowerPoint exhibit to assist with the presentation, right?
Yes.
Okay.
It consists of photos and the drawings that we prepared.
All right, so we're going to mark that as A2.
Okay. All right, so Jackson, would you walk the board through the PowerPoint exhibit
Certainly.
and discuss that?
Yeah, so here you can see on the screen photograph of the existing building. And the property is located in the OR3 zone. As we've discussed already, the zone allows multifamily buildings as a conditional use, although we don't meet all of the conditions. So these are several images of the neighborhood. We're discussing one of 5 almost identical houses that were built in 1907 at the northwest corner of Park Street and Walnut Street. These distinctive houses were all designed as multifamily buildings. They're defined by their gigantic ionic columns and double-decker front porches, as you can see here. As we've already discussed, a 5-story brick apartment building is directly to the left of the property. This is an overhead view, similar to the one that appears on the drawings that we sent to you. As you can see, the subject property is located on the north side of Walnut Street, about halfway between Park Street and Midland Avenue. Directly to the north of the site is a parking lot for 103 Park Street, and to the east of the rear yard is parking for this property's next-door neighbor, 174 Walnut Street. That parking lot directly abuts this property. Across Walnut Street to the south are the parking lots we've discussed already, serving 80 Park Street and the funeral home. Slide? No. Either way, that works too. Perfect. Let's see. So here, here you can see the site plan. On the left is the existing site plan. On the right is the proposed site plan, which is colored for ease of reading it. The site's an irregular flag-shaped lot with an area of 6,105 square feet. At its widest point, it's 50.69 feet wide. At its narrowest point in the rear, it's 18 feet wide. The property is 168.5 feet deep. It's generally flat, and there's an existing driveway on the west side of the property. The northwest corner of the building is located 9.08 feet away from the property line, and the existing driveway fits through that space. It varies from 8 feet and 9 feet in width. Most of the rear yard, as we've discussed already, is occupied by a parking lot for 6 vehicles. We're proposing, as you can see, to improve this rear area. The rear lot will be repaved, and the existing informal parking areas will be striped to make sure that all the cars know exactly where to go. Parking stalls number 1 and 2, located directly behind the building, will be increased in depth to provide conforming 9-foot by 19-foot parking stalls with a 24-foot backup area behind them between there and the westernly property line. Additionally, we'll have a new electric vehicle charging station between these 2 spaces to comply with state requirements for site plans. We'll remove pavement that exists in the vicinity of the shed at the northwest corner of the lot and plant that area with lawn. We're proposing new landscaping to the north and east of stalls number 1 and 2, as you can see in dark green on the screen. There's several existing mature trees around the lot, which are shown as circles. All of the trees that are currently there, they're doing well, and we plan to leave them. Lastly, we're proposing a new trash enclosure on the same location as the current one. As you can see on your drawings and on here, the new trash enclosure will have a roof to comply with town standards. It will be 7 foot 11 inches high. It will also have a concrete base, again, to comply with town standards. It'll have a solid vinyl fence, much like the existing one, to match the fence that surrounds the property. And on the front, we propose sliding gates to screen it off. The tandem stalls that are at the rear of the property are only 8 feet wide. That's, again, to help, because that's the space available, and to preserve those existing trees along the westernly property line. But as been described already, that parking layout functions now, so it wouldn't be changing.
So you could actually widen the parking spaces, but if you did that, you'd lose the trees.
Yeah, the property there is 18 feet wide, so 18 divided by 2 is 9. So there would theoretically be room to stripe 2 9-foot stalls if it were 100% pavement. Yeah.
Right, but you'd have to take down the trees to do that.
Exactly. And
Okay.
that would also mean drawing a stripe right on the property line. Here are the floor plans as has
By the way,
been.
before you do that,
Yeah.
did you discuss the other 2 parking spaces? You may have covered this, and I apologize if I missed it while I was looking for something. But the other 2 spaces, 1 and 2, are
Yeah.
they, did the dimensions of those spaces comply?
Yes. Yeah.
They're 8 by 19?
Yes, they are. They're 9 by 19.
Okay, 9
Yeah.
by 19.
Yeah. And all of the spaces, except for the 2 tandem spaces, will have access to that 24-foot backup area.
Okay. Can you, if you're able to, the comment in the engineer's report about the ability of car parked in space number
Yeah.
5 to maneuver in and out of the lot?
Yeah,
Are you able
so
to address that?
we realized that was most likely a reference to the original plan that we prepared before we submitted it to the DRC. After that meeting, we pulled parking spaces 1 and 2 further east, which provides for that full 24-foot backup. Currently, they're much more in line with the edge of the parking in the rear, which would make it difficult if one were to try to turn around here. But in this new alignment, we're proposing 5 or 6 feet here between parking space 5 and the end of the stripe for parking space 2. In reality, the car would probably be even further forward. That's more than enough space for a car to back up and then swing around. It's about what you'd find in any parking lot.
And even if it couldn't do that, they can always back out of the driveway, which is no different than most.
Right. Yeah, and is
Driveways
what they
around
do
town.
already.
Okay.
But this would certainly give them the ability to turn around.
It's better than exists today, is that what you're saying?
Much better.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, you were going on to the
Yeah.
floor plans before I
So,
interrupted you.
looking at the floor plans, Ms. Gauntlett already described them very well, so I won't go into too much detail on what each apartment is. But I will reemphasize that all of the apartments have proper two means of egress, either within the building or through the fire escape. On 2 site visits that I made over the course of several months, I completely agree that all of the apartments have proper fire doors, exit signage, smoke detectors. It's an extremely well-kept building, and all of the apartments are in excellent condition.
Could you just give us the square footages of each of the 5 units?
Yeah, certainly. So unit number 1 on the first floor, the 3-bedroom unit, that has an area, and I'm reading off of my screen, of 1,655 square feet. It's a very large apartment. On the second floor, unit 2R, the larger 1-bedroom, has an area of 756 square feet. The smaller 1-bedroom has an area of 667 square feet. And then on the third floor, unit 3F has an area of 479 square feet, and unit 3R has an area of 640 square feet. Both of those units also have some low area under the sloped roofs that was alluded to previously, which is mostly given over to storage. We did not count that area. So we've discussed the fire escape a few times. Here's an image that shows it. As you can see, the fire escape's set on the side of the property. It's the least obtrusive location that would still allow egress from both of the third floor units. You can see there's the middle dormer of the 3 is where there's doors to access the fire escape.
Speaking of the fire escape, there's a requirement in the conditional use ordinance that requires that fire escapes being closed.
Yes.
Is it feasible to enclose the fire escape there without impacting the functionality or utilization of the property?
No.
Can you explain?
Yeah. So as you can see, the fire escape has a bottom portion that drops down in the event of a fire. If that were lowered, it would prevent anyone from driving up the driveway. So that fire escape really needs to remain as kind of an open skeletal structure. Additionally, not in circulation, but were that fire escape enclosed, the units below it would each lose several windows.
Okay.
There's, as I'm sure, as you can see, just on the topic of fire escapes, in this next photo, there's actually a fire escape on the opposite side of this driveway also that serves the Midland apartments. And then there's several other open fire escapes in the neighborhood. I know of at least 2 others within about 100 yards. So it's not an unusual condition in that area by any means.
Okay.
This next slide depicts the Montclair zoning map that we all know. This property requires several variances. Our planner will go into more detail on that. But I do want to briefly review 4 site design waivers that we're requesting, just since I've touched on all of them already. So that would be Firstly, to allow tandem parking, which as discussed is for if two cars are in tandem parking, they belong to the same apartment. So that wouldn't be an issue, unlike anything that anyone with two cars at their house deals with. To allow parking stalls that are only 8 feet wide instead of 9 in the tandem spaces. To allow a 1.5-foot side yard setback from parking, and to allow the existing driveway that's only 8 feet wide at its narrowest point. All of these are existing conditions.
Right, so the driveway is existing, the setback from the lot line is existing,
Yeah,
and the current spaces are 8 feet. And by the way, the zoning ordinance permits 8-foot wide parking spaces as long as they can be reserved for compact spaces, isn't it?
true, yes,
No, it doesn't, I mean, okay.
yeah. So that's the PowerPoint.
Huh?
That's the PowerPoint.
Okay, I have a few questions I want to ask you based upon the engineer's memorandum. You have a copy of that? And I'm looking at
Yes.
the memo from Marissa Taberi dated June 16th? Okay.
Yes.
So I'm just going to direct you to a few of the paragraph numbers. Starting at number 3. Talks about the driveway. Suggestion about possibly widening the driveway to 9 feet.
Yeah, we certainly could widen the driveway at that narrowest pinch point. There's a little bit of space on the property to do so. Every little bit of extra pavement, of course, adds to our impervious amount. But if that's a trade-off that would be desirable, we'd be happy to do that.
Okay. But the current driveway is 8 feet, and it's functions with 8 feet.
Correct.
Okay, but you could widen it if the board
Yes.
wanted. Okay.
Probably to about 9 feet or so.
Okay. Are you able to add anything to the issue of drainage that's referred to in paragraph 8 of the engineering report?
Yeah, I didn't visit the site during rainstorms, so I don't have any firsthand observations of rainwater, but I can say that the site is very flat, so we're not directing water in an uncontrolled manner cascading towards someone else's property. And I can also say that we're reducing the impervious coverage of the property slightly as a part of this proposal. So
Okay.
that would allow for slightly more percolation into the ground.
I realize you're not an engineer, but there's no dramatic change in the drainage pattern
No,
based upon the pavement and the other improvements that are going to be made in the rear,
No.
because most of it's paved now.
right. Most of it's paved now. We're removing a little pavement from one area and adding a little bit to another. I would say that lawn area to the northeast of the property, part of which will become parking space number 1, part of that area is actually an old concrete patio or pathway. It's a little crumbly. It's in poor condition, but that area is not a pristine landscape by any means. It's partially impervious already.
Okay. Comment 14 in the engineer's memo just asked for clarification, if you know, as to how the grass area adjacent to the shed is intended to be utilized.
Possibly for gardening, I think just for green space to be aesthetically pleasing, mostly. There'd be room to put a lawn chair or two there if anyone wanted to.
It's your understanding that that would be obviously intended for the use of the tenants. Right. And the last comment I'd like you to address would be comment 15, which recommends a concrete walkway along the rear.
Yeah, we don't think this is necessary. The door from the building opens directly onto the existing asphalt. It's in the general, on the site plan, it's in the general vicinity of the dimension 2 feet that's roughly in front of parking space number 1. That's where the door is. So it opens to hard surface already.
Okay. And then lastly, there's a comment in the engineer's memo and the planning department memo about a lighting plan.
Yes, so currently there's several lights mounted on the rear of the building that are on motion detectors, which Ms. Gauntlett has told us works well, that the lights aren't on when there's nobody back there, and when someone comes back there, there are lights.
If the board wanted a plan to demonstrate compliance with the illumination requirements of the ordinance, you wouldn't have any objection providing that?
No, if the board requested some additional illumination, we would be happy to do that. I would say it would be difficult to avoid a small amount of spillover, but that would be onto the adjoiner's parking lot, so it wouldn't harm anyone.
The adjoining parking lot or onto the Midland apartment building, one of those two?
Yeah, although there's a solid fence on that side.
Okay. There are no further questions.
Yeah, just a couple of questions. Mr. Banks, as far as the parking spaces 3, 4, 5, and 6 in particular,
Okay.
at this point, there is nothing that would require either forward or backward parking, is that correct?
Sorry, what do you mean exactly?
That
Forward or-
for utilization of the space, that people would, they have the option to either park straight in or turn around and back into those spaces, is that correct?
Currently, that would be difficult to do, but with the proposed plan,
I'm
that
sorry,
would
what
be
would be difficult to do?
pulling.
At the current time or?
At the current time, pulling into the driveway and turning around and then backing into the space would be challenging, given the limited amount of turnaround area. But with the proposed plan, with that 24-foot wide maneuvering area, that would be possible.
Okay, so currently, as the parking arrangement exists, you would not see 3, 4, 5, and 6 as being able to back into those slots unless they backed all the way in from the street, is what you're saying.
I expect that that's what would be done.
Okay. But with the new arrangement, you think that it would be possible?
Yes.
The reason why I'm asking the question is because you had indicated that currently a number of the tenants back onto Walnut Street when they're leaving the property.
I would expect that they probably do. I haven't observed it personally.
Okay. Which is obviously is a heavily trafficked roadway. So I was just wondering if there was a way to avoid that, where the tenants were
Yes.
required to back into those slots, so that when they're leaving the driveway, they're pointed forward out into the street rather than backing into the street.
If a tenant wanted to do that with the new design, that would certainly be possible.
I also noticed, I think on the third floor, one of the third floor units, that there is an air conditioning unit in the window, a window unit. So I would assume that there's no central air in this facility. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Are you aware of any plans to put central air into this facility?
No.
Also, there is no, looking at from the photos, I didn't see any evidence of a generator or anything like that. Do you know of
There
any
is no
intent?
generator.
Do you know if there is any intent at some point to put a generator on the property to provide?
There's no intent to do that at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Caulfield?
Are there plans to repave the driveway?
Yes.
Okay. The whole driveway?
Certainly the parking area, that could use a repaving. I
The front-
expect,
The front looks a little jaggedy.
I don't think we'd be opposed to that.
On the trash container, on the regular size of where the trash is today, the existing, is the new trash container that you're proposing the same size? Lengthwise, widthwise?
It's approximately the same size.
Okay, no further questions, thank you.
Ms. Harris?
Your plan shows that you're proposing a EV charger? Is that
Yes.
for use for any tenant? How is that?
Yes, that would be for use for any tenant. As you know, electric cars are getting more and more popular. Also, the state's site plan ordinance requires that whenever a site plan is proposed, which we are doing.
Okay, and currently now, do the tenants pull their own trash to the curb, or is there a service that comes to?
I am not sure. Sounds like building management.
Management does that now.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Church?
Yeah, just want to clear in my mind, the tandem parking spots
Yes,
are dedicated.
yes,
So apartment one will get one side, apartment two will get the other.
yes, that's correct.
Um, okay. What happens, I guess that opens, that turnaround area could be possible. The EV, electric vehicle outlets you put in, what if cars parked there? How could, let's say, some of the tandem lot people, some of the tandem park people have electric cars. How do they charge them at those places are full?
Well, I think that would be a parking lot management issue, where, as you've heard, currently most of the tenants only have one vehicle. It's,
Yeah, but if we give a variance, we're giving it to the property, to the tenants.
yes,
So would it be feasible to move the charging unit to a neutral spot where everybody can
it depends on the length of the cord. If we were to put it in the curve next to the trash enclosure,
Yeah.
then it would probably be able to reach four of the 6 parking spaces, albeit stretching across one of them, but we'd be open to that. That makes sense.
Mr. Moore?
Mr. McCullough asked my question, so I'm fine, thank you.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The question I have is regarding the proposed trash enclosure.
Yes,
It has a slope roof, correct?
yes.
Yeah. And that slope into the property or away from the property?
It slopes into the property to avoid shedding water onto the neighbor's property.
Yeah, that was my question. And the existing gutters in the building, there's no plan to change any of that?
No, it sounds as if they're working quite well.
Thank you.
Certainly.
Let me start with the, I guess it was figure 10, I think, of the planner's report. Shows stormwater coming down the back side of the house and going into those shrubs. I guess that's what I was talking to the applicant about, as to, is that going to stay? I mean, my concern, while I agree the property is relatively flat, ultimately, everything slopes towards Park Street, and I'm concerned about potential impact on a heavy rain on the neighboring property.
I expect that position of the water would remain.
You know where the end of that extension is?
It's somewhere under that yew bush.
That much I could figure out. The tandem, I mean, this is more an observation than a question. I mean, I think if cars are parked in the side by side in the tandem spaces, it's a practical matter unless they are subcompacts. If they're full-size cars, it's going to be very difficult to access the shed and get a snow blower out. Bicycle maybe is probably thin enough to fit between them, but, you know, just knowing
Yeah.
where, you know, having observed a parking lot in a nameless place, not in this township, that has 8-foot wide spaces designated for compact cars, which people ignore, and seeing the distance or lack of distance between two full-size vehicles in a compact space, it, you know, very hard to walk between them, much less get anything between them.
Yeah.
That's really an observation, and just aware. The question, and I'm having problems orienting your drawing and the pictures. We were discussing potentially widening the driveway as it goes past the porch at that 8-foot dimension. But when I look at the pictures, I mean, your drawing shows there's a fair distance, you know, a couple of feet between the existing edge, but when I look at the pictures of there doesn't seem to be that much room between the existing edge of the driveway and the fence.
I'm looking at figure 8 on page 9 of the planner's report, and it looks to me as if there's a couple feet there.
Well, there is, but when you get to the sidewalk, there is. Okay, so let me ask you this. Do you have any objection to widening that so it's the same 8.71 feet that,
I can explain that. You're right. There is a large space that's right here, and one of the reasons that the paving wasn't done is a huge tree was taken out. There were 2 pillars that used to be on either side as you would back out, and they hindered you being able to back out, and you couldn't see. So, and there was a tree here, enormous tree. Had that taken down, and that's why they wanted me to wait on paving. They wanted me to wait 2 years because the roots were so big that they've started to dissipate. Same in the back. 2 big trees. So there is a lot of space that's right there that would widen, and I would be widening all of that because it ends up being shrubbery during the summer season. I'm going to extend as far as I can go, which is a few feet into the front. It kind of widens and opens as you hit the front.
So you're planning to extend the driveway?
Yes, I'm
and
doing the whole
widen it
thing.
as has been suggested.
It's just based on this huge tree. They wanted me to wait a period of time because of the bumps.
And
That
we
was
would
why.
repave the driveway also.
All the
then.
way,
Yeah.
everything and all the way in the back, yeah.
Yeah.
Another editorial comment. First time I went to the property, I smartly parked on Walnut Street and walked to the back. Second time I went, I cleverly drove in, and there were a number of tenant cars there. I backed out. Backing out is 1, rough, and 2, you're certainly into the sidewalk before you can see past the porch to see if there are cars coming, and, you know, I don't see a solution in terms of, because I think it's going to be difficult for cars to, I mean, backing in isn't going to be much easier, safer for when you come out, but, you know, I think it's not going to be easy if the other space is opposite, you know, whether 3 and 5 or 1 and 2 are occupied, to turn your car around is not going to be easy. But that's an editorial comment. You have limited space, and want to go through, Mr. Trembulac dealt with some of the comments in the engineer's report, and I just want to go through a couple of others as to whether you have any problems complying with those. So, number 4, And number 5,
Elevation information.
and what I want to, I'm going to tie that into one of my conditions.
I mean, that would require a topographical survey, which we could do if the board would, if that
Well,
would be desirable.
The point where
Yeah.
I'm concerned is that northeast corner where the storm drain I was talking about, and making sure that water is not ending up on the neighbor's property. I will do a verbal condition rather than requiring you to meet those, but that's where, and I'm concerned. Want to do condition 7. Jump up and down if that's objectionable.
Yeah, we're planning to repave the entire lot and driveway.
Okay. This is number 9, this is a question, not a condition I'm thinking of imposing. It's the rear door, do all tenants have access to that, or
All but one.
the one is the
One
front
being
3rd
3F,
floor?
yeah.
And so if they're garbage, they have to go out the front door, walk around.
Yes.
The others go out that back door, and the
Yes.
cars won't get in their way. Okay, I have a question for Mr. Williams on the number of parking spaces. And then conditions 18 and 19.
I believe that this was written before we submitted our proposed landscaping plan
Okay.
regarding number 18.
Well, the
We're okay.
I
Yeah,
mean, the memo
yeah,
followed,
we've
was after
showed
you did
the-
the revised plans.
Uh,
The
Well, the
revised
end-
plans are dated last revised May 31st, and the memos from June.
And it reflects the May 31 plan.
Right.
Okay, well, if there's any landscaping we haven't shown, we'll certainly add it.
And condition 19, doing a cross-section of the new paving, so
Yeah,
That's acceptable.
yeah, we can provide that.
and then I was a little, okay. I stopped myself before I said something, so, okay, I have no further questions.
Thank you.
Any other questions from members of the board? Any members of the audience who have questions for this witness? Okay.
Just a question, Mr. Banks, on the shed at the back of the tandem parking area,
Yes.
is there electricity there?
I don't believe so. There's not electricity there.
So there's no lighting in that area?
That's correct.
Is there any intent to place lighting back there?
If a lighting plan were required and there is deficient lighting there, then yes, we would provide lighting. I expect it would probably be in the form of bollards, given the site.
I was just wondering, how dark it gets back there.
Probably fairly dark.
I have lighting, it's motion on the side of
Right.
the house as you drive in, it goes
Right.
on, and then there's one in the back, that goes on, but then there's also a stationary that stays on all the time. Doesn't bother the neighbor, doesn't bother the neighbor, and it's directed towards the whole back of the building.
But the back of the tandem area where that shed is, closer to the shed,
It
would,
spills over, the back of the house has a large two-prong, and it does, one's here and then one here towards that parking.
so there is
as well.
sufficient lighting, is what you're
Yes.
saying?
Just doesn't go over into bother my next-door neighbor.
Thank you.
You want to call your next witness?
Yes, George Williams?
I'll leave these up here.
Sure.
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I most certainly do.
State your name and address.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is George Wheatle Williams. My address is 105 Grove Street, Suite number 3 in Montclair.
Mr. Williams, it's been a while since you're here. We have some new board members. Why don't you begin by just reviewing your educational background and professional qualifications?
Certainly. Again, good evening. I completed my graduate studies in city and regional planning at the Rutgers Graduate School, now known as the Blousing School, to date myself a little bit. I'm licensed by the State Board of Professional Planners and nationally certified by the American Institute of Certified Planners. I've been practicing in the field of planning for just over 30-plus years, with a primary focus on land use, economic development planning, but I and my firm also practice in a variety of planning specialities, including the development of master plans, zoning ordinances, redevelopment planning, a lot of redevelopment planning, and community engagement. I represent several boards, and my firm represents even more. Currently, I represent the Bloomfield Zoning Board of Adjustment, the Hoboken Planning Board, and my firm is in Orange, Newark, and Plainfield. I've appeared before numerous boards, including this august board.
And you were a member of this august board.
Yes, I was.
I would think you would lead with that, except Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr.
credentials.
Chairman.
A lifelong Montclair resident.
Born and raised.
So, most important qualifications. All right, Mr. Williams, you were hired by the applicant to provide testimony regarding the planning aspects of this application.
I was.
Variances. Okay, so why don't you begin, I guess, perhaps by telling us what you reviewed in preparation for your testimony this evening.
Certainly, I approach this application the way we approach every land use application, that begins with a review of the local land use boards, in this case, your 2015 master plan and 2016 reexamination report, your zoning ordinance, and all that in the context of the municipal land use law. I've also reviewed the site plan and site plan application before you this evening. I and my staff have been to the site on several occasions, and being a Montclarian, I know the area quite well. I also had an opportunity to review case law and planning literature in support of the release we'll be seeking this evening. And last but not least, I did review the board professional review memos, excuse me.
Okay. All right, can you provide an overview of the application and discuss the subject property and surrounding area?
Certainly, and I may refer to my notes periodically, but in general, you've heard a comprehensive testimony from both the applicant, my client, and our project architect. I'll try not to be too redundant. What I'd like to do is state a few things for the record that you've already heard before, and then go into a broad planning overview of the application before you. I may share an exhibit just to give some context to my testimony, and then jump into the statutorily required proofs for the release we're seeking. For the record, this is, again, property commonly known as 176 Walnut Street. Your municipal records identify it as block 2306, lot number 20. And as Mr. Our project architect mentioned, it is in the township's OR3, or Township Garden Apartment and Office Building Zone District. The property is irregularly shaped. As you heard, it's a flag-shaped lot and has approximately 6,442 square feet. As council mentioned in his introductory comments, the essence of this application, other than the site plan issues you have all been discussing, is really to legalize what has been in existence as a 5-family dwelling unit for over 20 years, to the best of our knowledge, perhaps longer, but certainly since the applicant owner has been the property owner for the site. And so we go through this process, as I'll get into a little bit more, because it is the site, the use is a conditional use, and as council mentioned, again in his introductory comments, we do not meet each of the conditional use standards, and therefore jurisdiction is properly before this board. The chairman mentioned, and it's also captured in your board planners report, those conditional use standards that we don't meet. I will go through those when I get to the D3, but I will just state for now, we agree with both your board planner and the chairman's recitation of the relief. Your board planner also asked for or suggest that a D5 variance is required. As this board knows, there are 6 variations of D variances, beginning with the most stringent, the D1, for a use that is not listed as permitted. Ours is a D3 for a conditional use variance. The D5 is for a density variance. I would submit to the board that since density is a conditional use standard, we could cover that under D3, but as I read the treatise by Cox on land use, it is advised sometimes it's okay to, or best, to go D3 and D5, and we're comfortable doing that as well. In addition to the D3 and D5 variances, as you heard earlier, there is a parking variance, and I will go through the release for the parking. Our calculations were as follows: 9.3 spaces required, 6 exist, and so we have a deficit of parking spaces. But as you've heard from the applicant, there have been secured off-site parking spaces, and more importantly, empirically, the applicant has suggested that the supply of 6 parking spaces currently actually does meet the real demand of parking on this site. With that, I will turn to the general planning overview, the big picture or high level. This application is very interesting because all of the conditions before you this evening have been in existence for almost a quarter of a century that we're aware of, if not longer. There is no intent to change the build-out or footprint of the building. So there's no change, intensification, or expansion of the non-conforming use. It is simply to legitimize its current configuration with 5 dwelling units. For the record, I think Mr. Bang mentioned this, the dwelling unit was initially constructed in 1907, so it's well over 100 years old now. It has 5 dwelling units as testified to, and those have been in existence for at least, as I said, 20 years. The applicant's testimony about how she came to that property, I think, is important. Typically, the concern of boards is that there is an illegal conversion of units. That is certainly not this applicant's intent, nor was it her experience. She bought the property as is, or in as is condition, and relied upon the certification from DCA, which labeled it as a 5 dwelling unit building. DCA is invoked under NJSA 55:13A-1. Basically, it says DCA has oversight over multifamily and hotel uses. The law ensures that the property is maintained and does not propose or pose a threat to health, safety, and welfare to their tenants and neighboring residents, and that's the benefit of the DCA inspections. You heard the applicant talk about the cycle of inspections that DCA undertakes for the site. One of those inspections leading to the recommendation that a fire escape be added to the site. It should be noted very parenthetically that the 3rd floor units are small, and I'll get to the conditional use standards. They're undersized by your code, but from a planning perspective, I would submit to this board that they offer the advancement of a policy to provide a continuum of housing options that includes smaller units and more affordable units. And I'll get into that a little bit later. The architect spoke about the aesthetic of the site. Any of you that have seen this building and its siblings will probably attest that it has architectural significance. It's got a certain grandeur to it with the double porches, et cetera. I'd just like to highlight some of the improvements that Mr. Bang spoke about in terms of what would accrue as a benefit to the community as a whole, and certainly the site if you were to approve our application. First and foremost, the redesigned parking lot with improved parking and maneuverability, repaving, striping. The new electric vehicle charging station, new roof over the trash enclosure, or actually a new trash enclosure. New landscaping, which actually reduces impervious surface slightly, and the off-street parking accommodation, which was introduced in the evidence earlier on. As planners, we're always looking at the impact of the application. From my perspective, having viewed the site, reviewed the application, and caucused with the project team, there would be a net positive to benefit to the community, certainly no substantial detriment to the community. And this will be thematic for the remainder of my testimony. That's largely in part because it's coexisted with the surrounding neighborhood for so very long, such that your approval would not have any negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood. In fact, if you were to approve our application, it would benefit the neighborhood through all the improvements that I mentioned a moment ago. Finally, I would just note, I think Mr. Bang mentioned this as well, the existing building comports with the land development pattern in the area. When I show you my exhibit, you'll see that the Midland apartment is to the left of our site if you are facing our property, and that's a apartment building with 71 units. There is a 4-dwelling unit building to the right of our site if you are facing the property.
And speaking of that building is identical to this building.
It's one of the siblings that is identical.
How many siblings are there in total?
I think there's 5 total.
Right.
Yeah.
It loops around Park Street. There's
Yes.
5 identical buildings.
Yes.
Correct? Although they look much different because of the,
changes, et cetera, yep.
well, and the colors and.
Exactly, yes. So all in all, if you were to approve our application with the site improvements that would harmonize this use with its environs, in my opinion, it would be a net positive for the site. So that's a very broad level discussion. What I'd like to do, and I almost hesitate to do this after Mr. Bang's exhibit, introduce an exhibit just to give context for the remainder of my testimony.
Okay. A3, we'll mark this? Okay.
Eight pages.
I think so, yeah. Okay.
While they're being passed around, I'll just give a preface. This is a very low-tech exhibit, really just capturing images from your land use documents and images that were captured during one of our several site visits, and really just to give context to the remainder of my testimony. It's a 8-slide storybook document. Commissioners, slide number 2 is simply an aerial photograph depicting our site highlighted in yellow with the red border and also highlighting the flag lot shape. And you have the dimensions mentioned in the caption that comport with the testimony you heard from Mr. Bang. Slide number 3, again, just foundational. It's a capture from your zoning map showing our site, this time in black with the yellow borders, just reinforcing that we are in the Garden Apartment District. You can see next to our site the Midland Apartments in the R3 zone district. Slide number 4 captures that grandeur I was discussing earlier. This is photo number 1. It's a frontal view of our site, capturing the fencing that Mr. Bang discussed during his testimony. I believe this is the PVC, and the chain link would be behind this fence if I remember correctly. And you can see both the Midland Apartments to the left and the neighboring apartment that has 4 dwelling units to the right. Slide number 5, and Commissioner Church asked about the location of the off-site parking. This is mislabeled. It says the funeral parlor. The funeral parlor parking lot is right next to it. This is 80 Park Street, so we can submit a clean copy if that would be helpful. But the point of this graph or image is simply to show you, Commissioner Church, if you were looking from the front door of our property, you look directly across the street at the parking area. Slide number 6, Commissioners, is 174 Walnut Street, which is in the same zone district as ours, and this is the property that's identified by your board planner as having 4 dwelling units. Finally, Commissioners, slides number 7 and 8. Slide number 7 is of the Midland Apartments, also referred to as 180 Walnut Street, and I mentioned earlier on, this is an apartment building with approximately 71 residential dwelling units, but it is in the R3 district, not our zone district. Last but not least, you see another one of the siblings. This is 84 Park Street, and it appears to be a 3-family property based upon our field observations. Again, all that just for context, and now I'll launch into the proofs.
Go right ahead.
Okay. So beginning with the D3 variance, I'm going to belabor this just a minute because I think it's important to understand the context of the board's jurisdiction and your deliberations, but I know you know about D3 variances. The D3 variance is covered by the landmark case, the Coventry Square case, which provides guidance to the boards on how they review applications for a D3 variance. Again, conditional uses are presumed to be appropriate uses in the zone districts, particularly if they meet all of the conditional use standards. When they don't meet one or more of those standards, they are before this board. So they are deemed presumably suitable as conditional uses. The focus for a board's review of a conditional use variance is on the deviation from the standard, and I'll go through what those deviations are in a few moments. I liken the review of these deviations as similar to or akin to a C variance. The standard approved for special reasons to support a variance from one or more conditions imposed on a conditional use should be relevant to the nature of the deviation from the ordinance, again, recognizing that the use itself is presumed appropriate. Thus, the conditional use variance applicant must show that the site will accommodate the problems associated with the use, even though the proposed use does not comply with the conditions or conditional use standards in the ordinance. And that's why Mr. Bang's testimony was so important about the site layout, and your questions, the good questions, and hopefully our answers were important in terms of that standard. The Board of Adjustment must evaluate the impact of the proposed conditional use variance upon the adjacent properties and determine whether or not it will cause such damage to the character of the neighborhood as to constitute a substantial detriment to the public good. I'll pause there for a second and submit board members as I get into the proofs finally. That is significant in large part because, as I mentioned in my introductory comments, this is a long-standing nonconformance. So it's been this way for over 20 years, as you hear us repeat over and over again. So from a planning perspective, if you were to approve our application, in my opinion, it would not rise to the level of a substantial detriment to the public good. And that's the first prong of the negative criteria. Similarly, the second prong of the negative criteria under Coventry is to show that the deviations or your approval is reconcilable with the legislative intent and your master plan. I will go through some of your master plan goals and objectives, but I will preface my proofs by saying in my analysis of your master plan, there would be certainly no substantial impairment to your zone plan under the Coventry guidelines. Commissioners, with that, I'll go into the deviations. Again, your chairman captured them in his introductory comments. The first is, well, they're all articulated under Section 347-5.b. Condition 1 deals with the size of the units, requiring that the units shall not be less than 800 square feet. You heard Mr. Bang give you a recitation of what each unit size is currently, and we're proposing to keep each of those unit sizes exactly the same. Some of them, several of them, are less than 800 square feet. Therefore, we deviate from that particular standard. Just for the record, I think Mr. Bang testified Unit 1 is 1,658 square feet, Unit 2 is 667 square feet, Unit 2R, excuse me, Unit 2L is 667, Unit 2R is 756 square feet, Unit 3R is 604 square feet, and Unit 3L is 479 square feet. It bears repeating that while these unit sizes are less than the strict application of your conditional use standard, they were deemed appropriate by DCA. They have functioned well, if you measure wellness in terms of the longevity of the tenants in those units, and we would propose that they could continue. From a planning perspective, I would submit that, and I think I mentioned this in my introductory comments, planning theory suggests and supports that a continuum of housing be advanced in every municipality. In this case, having a smaller unit, which is more affordable, in my opinion as a planner, makes good sense from a policy perspective, as it provides Montclair residents with an opportunity for a more affordable units, and for those who are perhaps aging in place, something that is smaller and easier to maintain. In terms of the Coventry standard, the deviation will not cause such damage to the character of the neighborhood as to constitute a substantial detriment. In fact, a passerby wouldn't know the size of the units at all. Condition number 2, principal building on the lot shall occupy no more than a quarter of the ground area of the lot. Again, this is an existing condition. Mr. Bang's testimony about how the site layout works, functions appropriately, is significant because it suggests that even or notwithstanding this deviation from your standard, there would be no damage to the surrounding character of the neighborhood, and that the site actually still functions notwithstanding this deviation. Condition 4, the ground coverage of the building exclusive of open porches, and I'll skip to the main part. Density shall not be greater than 24 units per acre. In my opinion, we can address density here, and a D5 is not necessary, but for belts and suspenders, we will do both. As this board knows, density is defined as the number of dwelling units per acre. In this case, 34 is the existing density, 24 is the maximum under your code. Typically, when boards think about density, the concern is not enough parking, traffic conflicts, et cetera. As you've heard from the applicant in this case and from our project architect, the site has worked well with the density that has existed for a number of years. And I'll go through this with greater specificity when I come to the D5, but as you know, the test is typically, can the site accommodate the extra density? And you'll hear me opine that this site can. Based on all of that, I would repeat that, in my opinion, this does not rise to the level of a substantial detriment to the public good under the Coventry standards. Getting close to the end, Commissioners, condition number 5, fire escapes or stairways leading to the second or any higher floor shall be completely enclosed within the building walls. You've heard testimony from both our applicant and the project architect that the fire escape was installed based on a permit from the municipality without enclosure, but more importantly, to comply with this conditional use standard, I think would be less than an optimal zoning alternative to this. Well, this is a better zoning alternative than a strict application of your code. For the reasons that Mr. Bang mentioned, if we were to enclose it, we would lose some of the windows on that facade or elevation, and more importantly, bringing it all the way down would cause conflicts with the ingress, egress from the driveway. So again, and I should add, and I don't know if Mr. Bang mentioned this, but from our field observations, while you can see the exposed fire escape from the street, your eyes are not immediately drawn to it, but if you do look at it, you're looking at the profile of the fire escape as opposed to the full width of the escape. Mr. Bang did mention that there are a number of homes in the immediate vicinity that do have exposed fire escapes. I'm not suggesting that because they have exposed fire escapes, we should also, simply that in terms of the negative impact, I would argue that there's no substantial detriment to the public good, because in point of fact, there are other homes with the same condition. And I'm losing my voice. In my opinion, the purposes of zoning that might be advanced if you were to grant this relief, even if Coventry doesn't require it, would be certainly subsection A of subsection I, of 40:55D-2, which, as this board knows, is to promote a desirable visual environment through creative development techniques and good civic design and arrangement. Again, that's why Mr. Bang's testimony was so important about what's being done to harmonize this site with its environs through landscaping, redesign of the parking lot, the trash receptacle, et cetera. All of those things make the site an even better site, notwithstanding the fact that the proposal here is not to enlarge, intensify, or expand the existing building. In terms of the negative criteria, I think I kind of went through that already. In my professional opinion, none of the deviations would rise to the level of a substantial detriment to the public good, impacting negatively the adjacent properties. In fact, the opposite would be true if you grant our relief. There'd be a number of improvements that benefit not only the applicant, but the surrounding area. In terms of the impairment to the zone plan for the second prong of the negative criteria, in my opinion, again, there would be no substantial impairment to the zone plan. In point of fact, some of the master plan goals and objectives would be advanced, and I'd just like to take a minute to go through those now. Housing objective 2 would be to increase affordable housing opportunities and also for households who are above those income maximums who cannot afford housing in Montclair. You heard, I don't know if the applicant shared this, but in my preparation for the hearing, the applicant has mentioned that she has not raised her rents in a number of years and that her rents are affordable in this Montclair market. Another objective is to promote and protect existing residential character and form in established neighborhoods. In our opinion, because there's no change to the exterior of the building, if you were to grant our reliefs, you would do that with the additional benefit of the improvements to the site. Finally, enable continued diversity of housing types and values throughout Montclair. That specifically speaks to the undersized units, in my opinion. Again, going back to this town's policy for creating housing opportunities for a variety of people, including the most recent ordinance for accessory dwelling units. These smaller units at this site have a niche market, and I would argue that is to the good of the municipality. Finally, housing objective number 1, offer housing types for a diverse population, provide a wide range of housing styles, and meet the needs of populations in diverse age, income, and physical ability. And I'll just conclude by saying that's the intent of this applicant by maintaining the current dwelling unit mix and size of dwelling units. In terms of density, the D5, as this board probably knows, the case law and municipal land use law liken the D5 to the floor area ratio. That is that this applicant has to demonstrate that the site can accommodate the extra density. Again, Mr. Bang's testimony was very helpful in establishing the predicate for that argument, meaning that this site meets all of the needs of a 5-dwelling unit building. There's adequate parking, particularly if you count the off-site parking, and that there will be no negative impact by having the extra dwelling unit. I say that with confidence because it has coexisted in this neighborhood for over 20 years with that density without any issue. Terms of the parking, and I'm near the end, Commissioners, thank you for your patience. The parking, in my opinion, could be cognizable under a C2 variance. As this board knows, the C2 allows the board to consider whether the benefits outweigh the detriments of allowing less than what is required parking on the site. And if on the whole, what we are proposing is a better zoning alternative than a strict application of your code, if this was an RSIS context, our residential site improvement standard context, the RSIS realizes that proximity to public transportation, walkable neighborhoods, and the actual demand for parking is something worthy of this board's consideration. There is a court case, Valenti v. Absekin, that suggests that if the real parking demand is less than that of the strict application of your code, then the board may consider the relief in the affirmative. You've heard testimony from the applicant based on her 20-plus years with a 5-dwelling unit that her experience, her empirical data suggests that the supply on site is adequate to meet the real demand for parking at this property. There's another court case, Homes of Hope, and that suggests that the board may consider parking relief when off-site parking is provided, and that's why it was important that the applicant submitted into the record an agreement which can be formalized further, but gives the board comfort that there is off-site parking directly across the street that would help this site meet the parking demand of your code, even if the real demand is less than that. So for all those reasons, I would suggest that under the C2 context, this board could comfortably grant the parking variance. It advances the purposes of zoning, subsection I, again, with the focus on the creative development techniques and Mr. Bang's parking layout, which is an improvement of what exists there now. No substantial detriment to the public good. I'd argue no detriment at all. And the benefits of granting this relief, in my professional opinion, would far outweigh any detriments, because there are no detriments to the lesser parking number or supply number. That completes my direct testimony, but I'm available for questions.
Of course you are. No further questions.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Williams. You have offered very convincing testimony as it pertains specifically to this property, but I'd like to talk in a broader context, if we may, for a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
So, so this would be about precedent, when we've learned in the various testimonies that there are at least 4 other buildings in this neighborhood that are part of this same design. So we'll say part of the same development for the purposes of this conversation. And I had a question sort of going into your testimony as to whether or not those others were similar to this one in terms of being multifamily. And your testimony has helped to identify the fact, I think your exhibit has helped to identify that at least a couple of them are in fact multifamily. None of them at this point, as far as I think I understand from your testimony, would reflect this property in terms of being a 5-family or a 5-tenant unit. Would that be your understanding?
That is correct.
So, so it raises for me sort of the question of, if we were to approve this application, what would be the precedent that might be set that would enable those other 4 properties to also reflect 5-family units as opposed to 3, and I think one of them is a 2 at this present moment. I don't know about the other.
It's a great question, Commissioner. Of course, the standard reply is that each application is reviewed based on its own merit. I would just go a step further and suggest what makes this application particularly unique is the tenure of the 5 dwelling units. So it's not a new proposal, but rather something that's existed for almost a quarter century, at least, we think. I also did not review the sites of the other siblings, so I'm not sure how large their sites are, but that goes to the issue of each application being reviewed on its own merit. Let's say they had a much larger site that could accommodate expansion, et cetera, that would differentiate it from this, whereas our application is really saying to the board, we hope you would agree with us that given the long-standing tenure of this 5 dwelling unit, it makes sense, since we're not expanding at all, to approve.
So we don't know, I mean, we don't necessarily have the comparative information before us of the sibling properties as you've described them.
No.
And so, I mean, when you mention, the issue of density in the neighborhood, let's say, for example, that these other properties are of a similar scope or scale. Would that not, in fact, be adding to the density of the neighborhood?
I'm not sure I understand the question, so pause me if I go in the wrong direction. So what I mentioned earlier is I didn't do an analysis of the other sites, but let's say, since density is the number of dwelling units per acre, let's say, for argument's sake, their sibling buildings are on much larger properties that would enable them to have a higher density, then that would be an appropriate thing. If, however, the lots are similar in size and the board felt that because of the unique shape, size of the other properties, additional density does not make sense, as opposed to ours where we've demonstrated it works, then the board would probably vote differently.
Thank you. You also drew attention to the fact, to the variance for allowing units with areas less than 800 square feet. And so, as you noted, in this particular property, I think 4 out of the 5 units are less than 500 square feet. So
800.
I'm sorry, 800. So what would be, I mean, if we were to approve this, what might be the implications then for the larger township in terms of enabling units across the town that would be less than 800? I mean, what would be how might that affect the township moving forward?
Again, I would argue it's not precedent setting, but I appreciate your question. And I thought, or at least I intended to articulate that from a planning perspective, and I think Montclair policy tracks with this, there is a benefit, particularly in aging communities like Montclair, Bloomfield, to provide more housing options, and that comes from your master plan as well, that make it possible for someone who doesn't need a lot of space, doesn't want to pay for a lot of space, to have a unit that is well-designed, as Mr. Bang testified, and as the applicant mentioned, her tenants don't want to leave. Housing options are a good thing. What I would like to say, and I may be going a little too far astray now, is for the town to go beyond suggesting an ordinance for accessory dwelling units and to follow suit with a lot of other towns now that are aging and say we should, smaller dwelling units should be considered in the following circumstances for the following reasons. I don't think it's a negative thing.
And how realistic is it to see approval of units that would not have cooking facilities? I mean, is that something that is, in your professional experience, is that something that is an emerging trend? Or is this a peculiar situation that is unique to this property?
I don't know how common it is in Montclair, but as a planner, I would suggest it's not a new trend. There have historically been housing typologies that include rooms for boarders that do not have cooking facilities, or generally speaking, when third floor or former attic spaces are converted to residents. It's not uncommon in municipalities to see this type of housing unit without cooking.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Caulfield?
Hi, Mr. Williams.
Yes.
Did you look at the, I guess, this building had a approval in 1956 at all? Did you look at that?
No. I'm aware of the approval, but I did not look at the approval.
So this was a building that was set as a two-family back in 1956, but they had three residents at that time. So they came to the board. They had the same situation. They were denied. They were violated. They came and they went to do the same exact stuff that you're doing for a three-family.
Right.
And it did get passed. So this building does have a history. There is a history in that aspect of that.
Correct.
In your testimony, you testified that the building to the right of us has 4 units. And on your pamphlet on page 8, the building that you have there has 3 mailboxes. So it looks like the variances between all these buildings is 3, 4, 5 might
Yeah.
be too much.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry. I don't know if I'd say
Well,
agree too much, but yes, 3, 4, yes.
Listen, I'm going to bend into your
Okay.
direction here for a
Okay.
second. I think this is unique.
Very.
And I think that, I think you harked on it just a bit about the affordability aspects of units and stuff like that. And I think that there's a uniqueness to this building that, when I first looked at this application, I was concerned that this would set precedences all over the place, especially units to the right, and all of these would jump on this in a heartbeat. But what's unique about this case is that the buildings on the units on the top don't have any cooking facilities technically. So they are unique in that sense, and the people that are looking for those apartments aren't everybody. There's only a certain amount of people that would take that apartment. So that's unique in that sense. If you looked at the building to the right, which has 4 units, I'd only imagine that it's set up the same way, but the top attic would have just 1 unit up there, which would probably have a cooking facility,
Yep.
which would not be the uniqueness that this building would have. Anne Marie, if you advertise this building, I mean, you pay $75 to the people next door. Advertise, if you don't have a car, I'll take $75 off the rent or something. I mean, maybe it's good not to have people have cars and stuff like that and promoting that stuff. But I know exactly the uniqueness that this building holds to this town, and I'm finding myself in a little bit more of that favor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield, the 1956 approval by the Board of Adjustment was to convert 2 units to 3 units. It wasn't an illegal 3 units that was asked to be legitimized.
So it's 2 unit to go to a 3 unit.
Right.
But didn't it say up on the top that the zoning office?
I think the,
Doesn't it
Zoning
say up
officer
here?
denied the
Yeah, the zoning officer denied.
conversion to a 3rd unit.
it's
Okay.
possible that at that time, in order to get to the board, you'd have to
Right.
make,
Under the predecessor, the municipal land use law, you went to the zoning officer. And some towns have continued that practice, much to my annoyance. But you got denied there, then the zoning permit, then you went to the Board of Adjustment. Ms. Harris?
One question. One of the variances needed is to allow the building to occupy 31.5% of the site. That's the current, there's no change to the building.
No change
structure
at all.
That's- And this is only the primary structure, it doesn't include the shed or the trash enclosure, correct?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Church? Mr. Moore?
I originally had a question regarding the size, but I think that you pretty much were able to speak to the point of its affordability and the diversity in size, and that kind of being something niche where it may fulfill a need in a town like Montclair. So I don't have any questions.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Williams. I guess the question that I have is almost a hypothetical down the road. On Unit 1, the first floor, if we were to approve this application, do you think in the future, it will be more likely or less likely that a second unit will be added in the future? So if they say that there's a new owner and they want to convert the unit number 1 into 2 units, do you think it's more likely, less likely?
I can only speak anecdotally to the hypothetical, but based on my conversations with the applicant, her understanding of the market, past and current and future, there's a real desire for each floor unit type that she has. So again, it's a hypothetical. I don't have a crystal ball, but my understanding is the demand for that first floor unit probably will not go away. There'll probably always be a market for that larger space, particularly with the porch, et cetera.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. McCullough covered a lot of what I wanted to ask you about, but I want to get a little more specific on that. And I guess, you know, we do, in fact, we have the tax map, so we know the lot sizes of all the sister properties. The 3 on Park Street are about the same size as this, not counting the tail, but the tail on this lot provides for 4 parking spaces and the storage shed. So, you know, I'm kind of comfortable that those applicants can't come in and say, we want more units than what's there. And I think you agree, none of those have 5 units now.
Correct.
Because the parking situation, we'll return to parking, because that's, the unit next door, the building next door is a larger lot. And I guess how, you know, and I know the speech of each application stands on its own, but you have sister buildings, and you have one, we granted a variance for 5 units. The owner of that building comes in and says, I have more room, I can provide more things on site, I want 5 units too. How do we say no to that? What is our basis of saying no?
So I can't give you the normal spiel, so let me try a different approach. I agree with you, Mr. Chairman, that looking at the aerial photograph in my own exhibit, the L-shaped lot next to us is larger. It would depend on a number of indicators, how that site, with the structure already lawfully thereon, would work with parking. Could they add additional parking? Would their additional units mean an enlargement of the building, or would they subdivide a unit that currently exists? And the board would have to deliberate each of those factors to make a determination.
Okay. Now, on the parking, since you seem to specialize in clients who want to use across the street parking, and I got to listen to a lot of questions about issues, but you know, 90% of the issues that were raised on your Patterson application aren't relevant here. But the question I have is, okay, the current owner of the 80 Park Street is willing to rent. That's not an issue.
Right.
But that person's not going to own the property. The funeral home may not be there, or may be different owners. What happens if, what protection does this board have if that owner says, we're not willing to let you use the adjacent property?
Again, a good question, Mr. Chairman, and that's why I layered my analysis for the parking deviation and relied in part on the off-site parking accommodation, but also on this applicant's experiential advice as to what the real parking demand is for the site. And she has said on the record that what is supplied on site currently is more than adequate for the 5 dwelling units. What I neglected to mention is, in terms of true Montclair character, this site is a stone's throw from the Walnut Street train station. It is proximate to the downtown, so you can walk to Bloomfield Avenue and catch buses or shop. You can get to the train station. So this site in my opinion, based on a testimony from the applicant and my analysis, is perhaps ripe for a parking variance, even if there were no off-site parking.
Well, let me, you had, I think in the beginning of your testimony, you had calculated that the strict application would be 9.3 spaces, and
Yes.
hence 10 would be required, is that correct?
That is.
Okay. And I have no question currently there is not the need for 10 spaces, and wearing a different hat, I would argue strenuously that 10 is excessive in this situation, although, the one mass transit option, which used to be very nice with the camp bus to the city, is gone. It's a longer walk to the train. You still have, the bus to Newark is right out front, right on Park Street, right out front, so, or to Montclair State, depending on which way you're going, but it's, and I, it's just, the tenants aren't going to be there. The tenant who's been there before she owned it is not going to be there, but tenants are going to turn over, and they may have different, is there a protection this board can have to make sure the parking, adequate parking will be available?
Mr. Chairman, other than, well, let me say perhaps two things. One protection is, and I know many boards don't like to hear this, but Commissioner Caulfield, I think, alluded to this in your colloquy with the applicant. Representing many developers or homeowners, if parking is not available, those people that need cars typically won't rent that unit. And I know boards get frustrated with that argument, but I have found that to be a bit of a truism. Other protections would only be a condition that the applicant make a best effort to secure off-site parking elsewhere if, in fact, her agreement with either the funeral parlor or 80 Park should lapse.
And then the other question I have is, I assume, is it correct the applicant is not proposing that we impose any affordable limits on the units?
That's correct.
And my other question is, if we simply approve the variance, there would be nothing stopping full kitchens being installed in the third floor units, is that correct?
I take your point, yes.
Okay. Any other questions from members of the board? Okay. Are there any members of the audience who have either questions, comments, statements, anything you want to say about the application?
No, it's okay.
George, if you want to say something,
Very quickly, I answered prematurely perhaps about nothing precluding the introduction of kitchens. My recollection from conversations with the applicant is that the inspector precluded her from adding a kitchen to those third floor units.
Can I comment on that? The chairman's point is correct that if this is approved, the kitchens can be installed. I believe the code enforcement officer is trying to mitigate the situation in the interim.
Okay.
As the kitchen facilities push these quarters into apartment style, so it's a temporary solution, I suppose.
I mean, my client's willing to agree to a stipulation or condition that there can be no kitchen facilities on either of those units on the third
That's
floor.
where the chairman was going.
okay.
Did I misunderstand?
We'll discuss that. I'm not
Okay.
sure I want to impose that condition, but I want to
Okay.
hear what my other board members have to
Okay.
say. I just wanted to be clear that unless we impose a condition, they could be full kitchens installed in those units. And I understand the current owners, that's not where she's heading, but this is an approval forever.
Right.
Mr. Tremgulak, unless you have any witnesses or anything you want to sum up? and-
Nothing further. I just want to, yes, and I will be brief because I'm not going to repeat everything that Mr. Williams just said. But just on the last question you were raising, Mr. Chairman, about the parking on the neighboring lot, it reminded me application I had a few years ago for 83 Park Street, which was Dr. Rotunda's mixed-use building where his dental office was, and he had an arrangement with a lot across the street from Walnut, and to provide additional parking, and the board included a condition in that approval to deal with that, which specifically said, I had it a minute ago, the applicant shall continue the current agreement with the owner of, in that case, 161 Walnut Street to allow parking on that lot, and in the event that agreement was terminated, that the owner would be required to enter into an agreement with another property owner within walking distance to replace that. So, I mean, I think we'd certainly be agreeable.
What was the date of that resolution?
Fairly recent.
83 Park Street, and it was August 21st, 2019. That just popped into my head as we were discussing that. You know, it's a very unique application in so many respects. You know, property was being utilized as a five-family. My client bought it as a five-family. She relied on the fact that there's a certificate from the state that it's five-family. And I can tell you in my practice, I've had, you know, a dozen conversations with people, you know, buying a multifamily building, and I say, have you checked, do you know it's legally permitted? Well, I got the certificate from the state that says it's okay. And of course I have to tell them, well, that doesn't mean it's okay with zoning, you need to check with zoning, but most people believe, you know, or rely upon those DCA certificates just like my client did in this case. So she didn't, you know, she just continued the prior use of the property, which as we've mentioned numerous times, has gone on for in excess of 20 years. And, you know, in that regard, you know, when you're talking about D3 variances, the conditional use standard, it's really, is the site suitable for this use, notwithstanding the deviation from these requirements? And usually the board's got to speculate and sometimes, you know, make some assumptions going forward. In this case, we know it's suitable. We know it can accommodate these deviations because it's existed for 20 some odd years in that condition. It's a somewhat, you know, it's highly unusual in that regard. The only, you know, and the other thing I just wanted to mention is, and Mr. Williams, you know, mentioned this in his testimony. You know, our town has recognized for a number of years now that we need more housing alternatives or options for, I'm going to say, you know, senior citizens, aging population, people who don't need the big houses or big apartments, but want to stay in Montclair. Where do they go, you know, to someplace, something that's affordable? And I think there's a real need, there's a real benefit, and there's a real, you know, I think policy on the part of this town to provide alternatives for smaller places that are much more affordable so that people can stay in town and age in town and not have to move out of town, a town that they may have lived in for decades because, you know, they can't find a smaller housing option. This fills that need. And, you know, as Mr. Williams also noted, that policy objective was just recently highlighted by the town council in adopting the amendment to the zoning ordinance to allow for accessory dwelling units, which are defined, you know, in the ordinance as units between 300 and 800 square feet. No more than 800 square feet is the largest accessory dwelling unit you can have. And the ordinance in its first paragraph refers to the purpose and intent of it and the policy objectives that the council is seeking to accomplish. And they apply exactly to what we're talking about here. One, provide citizens with the opportunity to retain their homes, age in place, and create adaptive living environments for people living with disabilities. Two, increase the supply of attainable housing within developed properties while putting minimal pressure on town services such as schools and infrastructure. 3, provide flexible housing options for residents in keeping with the goals of the master plan that respond to changing family needs, smaller households, and increased housing costs. That's exactly what these units, we need more of these in town. I'm part of this aging population myself. And this, and especially in this location, where you're walking distance to Walnut Street and the Walnut Street train station, you're walking distance to Bloomfield Avenue, and if you're living in a 600 square foot unit or 450 foot square foot unit, you're not likely going to have, you may have one car, but you're not going to have more than one car. So I think that limits, the parking demand. And again, this particular building is between a 71-unit, 5-story apartment building and the identical house next door. That's 4 units. So, and undoubtedly 4 full units with kitchen facilities. So, this is appropriate for this location. It's been at this location for so many years without any complaints from neighbors or anything else until, the zoning violation was uncovered. And we're improving the situation. We're, providing for striped parking, better parking, a little bit more room for cars to move in and out. We're adding a little bit of landscaping, reducing the impervious. There are benefits, to this property, which inure to the benefits of the neighboring properties as well. So, and again, my client is willing, as you've heard, if necessary, to stipulate that there would be no cooking facilities in either of the 2 units on the upper floors. And all of the conditions that, were discussed, I think we've complied or will comply with all of the comments of your planning department and your engineer. I think this is again, a unique application. I think it's a good application, and I would hope that the board would approve it.
Okay, we'll start with Mr. McCulloch.
So I'm going to just preface my comments by saying that I'm, basically in support of this application. But I do want to say that I'm sort of dubious on the question of whether kitchen facilities ought to be an option for the 3rd floor. I'll be interested to hear from my colleagues, but I probably could go either way in terms of the long term. I mean, I think in terms of the immediate, I'm convinced that the applicant is intent for full kitchen facilities as not being necessary, but she may not own that property forever. So the other comment that I want to make, though, Mr. Trembulac, is that a 3rd floor unit without an elevator and without kitchen facilities is hardly prime space for an aging population or for people with disabilities. You may be the exception to the rule, but
At the moment, maybe.
And certainly considering the fact that, if you don't have kitchen facilities, then it obviously means that either you're going out or you're having deliveries, which means you probably have to go downstairs to meet the delivery person. So it's not necessarily very practical when we're talking about sort of characterizing it as appropriate for certain population groups. I certainly would,
You shouldn't have limited
I mean,
that
for,
to age
for
and
some younger people,
Yeah,
yes,
younger people, too.
obviously.
Yeah.
That's different, but for certain population groups, I don't think that really
Mhm.
is a factor. With that said, I'm sure that the chair is gonna have some conditions. I can already sort of hear those wheels spinning, so I'm gonna yield to those. But for the most part, I think I'm sort of in support of this application.
Mr. Garfield?
Yeah, just as John said, cannot see seniors going up and down the stairs. But you know what I do see in this apartment is somebody who got out of college that has really bad loans, that can't really afford a car, but can maybe afford this apartment.
Yeah.
And I think that's something. So I'm in favor. Thank you.
Ms. Harris?
I'm generally in favor of this application just because it's existed as is for so long. And I think that the applicant purchased the property on good faith, based on the information that she has. I personally don't think that there's any reason to restrict the kitchens on the third floor. If she opts to do it now, great. If some owner in the future decides to do it, I don't think that they should be limited, if we do grant this variance. And I also, just reading the planner's report in terms of the number of parking spaces provided, the 7 with an asterisk includes the 2 that's counted with the EV, not necessarily the parking spot across the street. Is that correct?
Not certain what an asterisk is.
No, I think that's what it is, yeah.
Okay.
Double counting the one EV space.
Okay, yeah. I don't know that making a stipulation that the off-site parking space is permanently attached to this property is also required. I think given the types of units that we have here, the parking requirement is excessive. I know the RSIS is a state issued code, but I really feel like it's not relevant to kind of the current conditions that we live in, and the fact that we're trying to depend more on public transportation. So I personally don't think that there needs to be a stipulation for off-site parking here, especially since it seems to go unused most of the time. But I am in favor of this application.
Okay, Mr. Church?
Yeah, I would be in favor of the application because it's been there for so long. Basically, it was a good faith effort on the current owner's part to purchase the building, thinking it was 5-unit building, and then she got cited for it. I would approve it with the stipulation, of course, at this point, with me, there'd be no kitchen facilities allowed on the third floor. I would make that a stipulation, even in the future. I think that in the case of a fire or something like that, from a kitchen fire or something like that, someone on the third floor may have trouble getting out. So I would approve the application based on the fact that it's been there and it was purchased in good faith with the knowledge that she was given.
Mr. Moore?
I'm generally in favor of the application. I don't see it as a detriment in the community in which it resides. You purchased it in good faith, and I guess you would be carrying on with the existing business as it is. I do also take into consideration the state of housing that we're in and how there's a need of diverse housing, more affordability, smaller units. So because of that, I am generally in favor of the application. Thank you.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm also in favor of the application, recognizing the uniqueness of this application and the building itself. I do agree with my colleague, Ms. Harris, about the kitchen. I will be actually okay to not stipulate a restriction on the kitchen. But generally, I'm in favor.
Also in favor, though I am trying to figure out, and hopefully if we ever get the application, I will have figured out by then the basis of distinguishing this from the house next door if it comes in for 5 units, because I'm not readily seeing a difference between the properties. However, I think, and it may be, you know, the same reasons we're giving for approving this is the same reasons we would give for that on its own merits. You know, one, I don't think the accessory dwelling unit is applicable. I mean, it doesn't meet the requirements of that. On the other hand, I think the master plan language about providing for a diversity of housing units and, you know, what we're largely missing in town is smaller dwelling units. You know, and I think, you know, one thing, Richard, if you could make a note that in our recommendations, I'm not advocating we change the 800 feet, but that at least we think about that when we're making our recommendations, because that does seem to fly in the face of what the master plan is doing and where the town is heading with the accessory dwelling units, as to, you know, this is a vestige of another era and do that. I think, you know, to go through, the applicant has met the requisite proofs for both a D3 and a D5 variance for the increase in number of dwelling units. I think there is also the justification for not providing the parking on site, and I'm halfway where Ms. Harris is in terms of not having the exact same condition that we imposed on the Rotundo application that's a half block away. What I would modify that to say that if there is a demand for parking that beyond what can be accommodated on site, that the applicant is required to make arrangements to provide that within walking distance. I think, you know, over time things might change. The legal RSIS requirement is 10 parking spaces. They're at 7 based on the charging station. You know, so you know, I do that. I don't see the need to restrict kitchens. I'm not saying she should put in kitchens or they're needed, but that's not anything that's before us in terms of the variances and the conditions of the conditional use that they're not meeting. Kitchens would have no impact on that. She installed a fire escape, so she meets the egress needs. So if there's a fire, people get out. There are scores of third-floor apartments in this town that have kitchens, and I mean, this is really an exception. I'm assuming some of the sister units have people on the third floor with kitchens, units on the third floor with kitchens, and so let me go through the conditions, which aren't all that many. Okay, so let's be clear. We're granting preliminary and final site plan approval and the requested waivers subject to any modifications resulting from the conditions I'm about to do. The trash enclosure should conform to the ordinance. I did the parking condition. Again, I'm not going to try and re-articulate that the driveway be widened so it's at least 8.71 feet to match its otherwise narrowest point. If you want to make it wider, but at least to the 8.71 feet. The parking area and driveway be repaved. That the that They comply with the engineer conditions 7, 17, 18, and 19. And they provide elevations at the northeast corner of the building and and beyond that, to the extent necessary to show that the outfall from that drainage pipe will not impact the neighbor's property. The other thing we discussed is moving the charging station. I think I leave that to you. I think there are practical problems in the corner, which, well, in theory, any unit, but anyone charging there, the two spaces on either side of that work, but then otherwise you're extending it. And I think more likely people are going to pull up to that anyway. I'm just, leave that to you to find the best space for it. And I'm assuming the tenants will work out among themselves if one has if one or more than one having a car requiring the charging, that they'll work it out. As it is, the tandem spaces are going to have to be some working out to make sure that works. Any further discussion among board members? If not, would someone like to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve this application, keeping in mind the conditions stated by the chair.
Is there a second?
Second. Seconded by Mr. McCullough. We'll take a roll on
I
that.
think we're okay, but yes, we should do it.
Okay. Mr. McCullough?
Yes.
Mr. Caulfield?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Church?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Moore?
Yes.
Mr. Vieira?
Yes.
Thank you.
And I welcome our visitors from the Bloomfield Board of Adjustment. Make sure this isn't an infiltration. Okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. We'll come back at 10:30 precisely if the next applicant gets set up. Hope we can move those much more quickly.
Thank you very much.
Does he have to announce, or? Okay. The next application is that of Albert Lynn and Bailey Shannon for property at 23 Cornell Way. This is an application for a variance to construct a front porch. The property is located in the R-OA one-family zone district and is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 18 and Block 4704. Variance is requested from Montclair Code Section 347-39B1 in that a minimum front yard setback of 50 feet is permitted and a front yard setback of 40.7 feet is proposed. Our taxes paid, and it's a notice in order.
Property taxes are current. Proof of publication and affidavit of service was received for the public notice.
Mr. Lynn, you want to step forward? Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Albert Lynn, 23 Cornell Way, Montclair, New Jersey.
Mr. Sharoon, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and position.
Richard Sharoon, Planning Technician and Zoning Officer in the Planning Department.
And Mr. Chairman, we should note that Board Member Caulfield has recused himself on this application. Okay, Mr. Lynn, you can sit down.
Anybody joining you can have a seat with you.
And are you Mr. Zmuda?
Yes,
Would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
I do.
State your name and address.
Stephen Thomas Zamuda, 314 Village Place, Wyckoff, New Jersey.
And you are a registered architect in the state of New Jersey, is that correct?
That is correct.
License is in good standing?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Why don't you proceed?
Okay. We come before the board to seek a variance approval for the addition of the front porch of my client's residence. The home currently has a single entrance, main entrance to the front that has a severe leak, water leak, and we are originally brought the project before me to correct the leak, and we've decided the best solution would be to install a roof over the front of the house. And through the design, that incorporated a small pediment, and we're looking to extend it into a porch, which would encompass the main portion of the front of the house. And with this, it meets all the variance requirements except the front yard setback, which we are encroaching onto within the 50-foot setback. I've also taken a look at the other homes that are presented on sheet number 2, T2, which are 2 to the left of the house and 3 to the right. And I've also noticed the approximate distance from their facade to the property lines. And I've also indicated an average setback, which is a combination of all the houses of 44.17 feet. So the new porch that we're looking to install will have a shed roof over it, and it will have a bluestone patio surface below it. It will be an open porch, so we're not thinking that this would be a large obstruction on the front of the house. It's kind of open air, supported by columns, and it also is in keeping with the colonial style of the surrounding homes. The homes are a colonial revival. 1957 it was built, and some of the other homes to the immediate right do have a portico, a pediment over the front door, and some of the adjacent homes do have porches. So we're trying to retain that look of the house on the street, and there wouldn't be any substantial detriment to the public good that we're seeking this variance that we're encroaching on the front. The other ideal reason to have a porch on the front of the house is to bring the family to the front yard, where many homes are backyard focused. to incorporate the family on the front porch and to meet and greet the neighbors as they're passing by. But ideally, this would be also to solve the problem of the water intrusion in the house, where Mr. Lynn has restored his front foyer twice due to water intrusion. If you would like, I can walk you through the plans, or you all have a copy of it. If there's any questions, I can answer them.
Why don't we do questions and, we'll call it questions?
Thank you. Not a lot of questions, really. So, Mr. Samuda, from what I understand, in terms of the design of the porch, what you're proposing, or you and Mr. Lynn are proposing, is pretty consistent with the neighborhood. I mean, based on sort of my view of the neighborhood, that there's nothing about this design that, I don't want to say, I'm not saying outstanding in a negative sense, but but I mean, in a positive sense, it's very consistent with the neighborhood itself.
Yes, it will have some classical architectural elements on it, and it preserves the character of the neighborhood.
And the house itself sits far enough away from the sidewalk that it affords privacy. I mean, to really appreciate the characteristics of what you're proposing, you really need to be up close to it.
You would still see the elements of the porch roof from
Yeah.
the street.
The
There's no
roof line
sidewalk,
itself,
but it will also have a planting landscaping in front of it, which will soften, which existing conditions have.
But the blue paved stones, I mean, you'd have to be up there to really sort of appreciate that.
Yes, as you step up to the porch, you would see the blue stone.
And then, the columns, there's been a recommendation from the Historic Preservation Commission to have, I think, the 2 columns on either side of the front window. Is that right?
Yes, the recommendation from the Historical Preservation Commission did say to add an additional column and center them over the bay window, just more from an aesthetic point of view.
Yes,
And we will comply with that.
the other question is, and this is based on, again, sort of your initial commentary, and you said, and maybe this is a question to Mr. Lynn, and that is that part of the intent here is to have a porch area where the family can be on the front porch as opposed to the back porch. So you're looking at this as an area where there's more entertainment and ability to greet the neighbors. Can you say more about that, please?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably a secondary, benefit, right? But like the initial kind of reason why we did this was more out of necessity, because when we first moved in 2019, the house was fine, but then when it was starting to rain a lot more, the rain would seep into the lobby area of the house, inside the house, and our wood would buckle up from all the water. And we thought, well, maybe this was just, and we didn't realize it was coming from the initial, the small kind of, it's not even a porch, right? It's just like a stoop, yeah. And it was coming from there. And so we redid that, the lobby area, and redid the wood, and it happened again, obviously, the next time it rained heavily. So we realized we need to fix this stoop. We wanted to put a roof on it. We kind of sketched it with just putting a roof over the stoop, but then it just kind of looked out of balance. And then we thought, okay, maybe we'll extend it a little bit further, and then it just looked manufactured. And then we kind of thought going across the kind of the front of the house just looked a lot more natural. And so the secondary benefit was that, yeah, we could, it's more space for the family.
And would entertainment on the front porch be in character with the neighborhood or out of character with the neighborhood?
Basically, what my neighbor does, he just sits on his front porch and, has a cup of coffee.
Okay, all right. And you might do the same thing?
I might do the same and say
Okay.
hello.
All right, thank you.
Yes, in terms of the depth of the proposed porch, how does it compare to the stoop that's being removed?
Okay, the current stoop will be removed, and that has about 54 square feet. And we're actually coming out probably another foot past it once we demolish it. If you take a look on A1, it's actually, including the steps, it's 6'2" off the facade of the house. And the new porch will be 6 feet. So it's actually not as far if you were to include the step.
Thank you.
Yeah, are you gonna be removing that tree? Does that have to be, I think it's a Japanese maple in front.
No, there's no plan
No,
to
no
remove.
intent.
That's not
That's
gonna
further
be
out,
affected.
further
Okay,
towards the
and the
street.
other question I have, the bow windows not being affected,
No, not at all.
not at all.
Yeah, that's remaining.
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
I see that you are relocating the leader and drain.
Yes.
The leader and gutter. So with the drainage, the way that it's running off, is there, will it run off away from the house? Is there a drainage system that it's going down into?
There's existing leader connections, and so it's subgrade drainage, and we're reconnecting to that.
Reconnecting to it, so
Yeah.
it's gonna go right into the ground, or it's running?
Right into the ground the way it exists.
Okay.
Right. The surface area from the roof will connect into that.
Any additional lighting?
We will have a light fixture under the porch itself.
Under the
Right. And there will be no lead off the porch area. It'll be contained.
Thank you.
Mr. Vieira?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess a question for Mr. Lin. The water damage that you noticed was coming from the door, the entrance. Did you notice any damage from the foundation or anything related to that?
No damage, no damage to the foundation. It was just that the wood that was there was buckling up. So it's actually fine, but, when you step on it, it's rocky.
Thank you.
I have another question.
Mr. Moore?
Have you tested the drainage system? Have you, checked to see if that actually is functioning properly, outside of the assumption that, it was kind of just running back into the house from the existing porch?
What, we have not tested it, other than maybe what my client would recollect. But prior to the construction, we will actually snake out the drain to make sure that any debris is not going to impede the flow of it.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I guess, how do you define, what drain? Because we...
From the roof
do-
drain.
From the
drains,
roof? Yeah, and we don't, it's definitely not from the roof.
No backup. Nothing backs up.
Yeah, no.
As it runs off down the leader onto the
Yeah,
ground, right?
that-
right.
that-
It doesn't
that all works
pool-
properly.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
no, yeah, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking about, as it gets colder, ice eventually. if
Yeah, we went
everything is
through
kind
all
of
the different
properly
kind of
planned.
scenarios because we didn't want to redo this again, right? We already did it once. So, this is not my profession, but 99% was sure. This is my contractor actually behind us, and he
I
went
can
through
see.
all of the different kind of options, right? This is definitely the most intuitive, logical one that it's coming from right there because it's literally right next to it.
Great. Thank you.
I have a couple of questions. and some of this is the answer, and, you know, I mean, the homes along this, well, along Cornell Way, period, you know, they all, like your house, are, portions of the house are in front of others' portions of the house, and it varies whether left side, right side, center, as to what's more forward, but the thing that's troubling me, and then I'll get into some design issues which don't fully affect that, is several of the homes have the 41.7 feet as being the closest they are, and you're going a foot closer than any of those. You know, because of the curve in the road, because of the hill, because of all the houses having different distances to the road. You know, I'm not troubled by your deviating from the 50 feet. They all deviate from the 50 feet, and, you know, it varies between 41.7 and, I guess, 46.7. It's the extra foot, and, well, I'll ask the question, why did you decide to have the 6 foot versus 5 foot, which would keep you the same distance as several other homes on the block?
The reason for this particular porch would be using the front porch as a place for the family to stay on the outside of the house, on the front porch, and the furniture placement.
Okay, and I guess my other question is, you know, you chose to do it from the front entrance over in front of the bow window. Why not go the other way, and then you have even greater depth, because that portion of the house is set back further?
And the reason was we wanted to center it on the main portion of the house itself.
Yeah, we did consider
Because
that.
the garage is balancing the right side. If you look at the elevation on A3, we're trying to keep it balanced. So the main portion of the house would have the porch extending across it, and then the garage and the left side of the house is set back.
Any other questions from members of the board? Any members of the audience who either have questions or statements or anything you want to say about the application? Okay, anything further either of you want to say before we discuss and vote on the application?
The only item I would just add is that we are looking to incorporate the same type of stone that's on the facade of the house at the front step. There'll be a single step up to the porch, so we're matching the materials, and the same with the paving. And I believe, in my opinion, architecturally, it will add to the neighborhood. The house is built in 1957. Not many of the homes have changed, but some of them have, and there's been some good design, and we're going to incorporate that into ours.
Start discussion with Ms. Harris.
I'm in favor of this application.
Mr. Church.
I'm also in favor of the application.
Mr. Moore.
I too am in favor of the application.
Mr. Viera. to
I'm also in favor of the application.
Mr. McCullough.
I'm also in favor.
I'm in favor. I think, given the varying setbacks of each house along this stretch, the curve in the road, the hill, this is not going to be standing out any more than any of the other houses on the block do, and so I think, given the way the house is currently configured, they've justified the variance, and I don't think it'll result in any substantial detriment to the neighborhood or a substantial impairment to the intent of the zone plan. Someone want to make a motion?
Could there be a condition to follow?
Oh, but yes, to
Yeah.
follow the HBC conditions.
All of the three, they have three.
Three, yes, all three.
Okay. There's one condition with the proposed, so do we have a motion?
I make a motion to approve this application with the requirements of the recommendations by the Historic Preservation Commission.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Church.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any
Thank you.
opposed, any abstentions? Go build your porch.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
You're all invited to lemonade on the porch when it's built. Thank you.
I would agree, it's nothing outstanding
The next application is that of Justin and Julie Overdorff. This is for property at 57 Llewellyn Road. This is an application for variances associated with a proposed addition to the dwelling and the installation of a generator and central air condensers. The property is a corner lot at the intersection of Llewellyn Road and Harrison Avenue in the ROA, one-family zone, and is designated on the township tax maps as Lot 10 in Block 2003. The addition to the dwelling requires a variance from Montclair Code Section 347-39C for a setback of 33.4 feet from the easterly property line, where a minimum setback of 49.9 feet is permitted. The generator and central air condensers are proposed to be located along the westerly side of the dwelling, which require variances from Montclair Code Section 347-40B, and the location is between the dwelling and the Harrison Avenue front property line. Are taxes paid, and is the notice in order?
Property taxes are current, proof of publication, and affidavit of service for the mailing of the notice was received.
Okay, would you both raise your right hands? Do you swear to tell the truth of the matter pending before the board?
I do.
Yes.
State your names and addresses, please.
Justin Overdorff at 57 Llewellyn Road, Montclair, New Jersey.
Nicholas Giuliano, 301 Parkview Place, Somerville, New Jersey.
Okay, Mr. Giuliano, in what capacity are you testifying?
Licensed architect on behalf of the property owner.
Okay, and your license is in good standing?
Yes.
Mr. Sharoon, would you raise your right hand? Do you swear to tell the truth in the matter pending before the board?
Yes, I do.
State your name and position with the township.
Richard Sharoon, Planning Technician and Zoning Officer in the Planning Department.
Okay, proceed.
So I'll start. Our project is to add an addition onto the rear of the house to create an enlarged mudroom and laundry room adjacent to the kitchen and accessible directly from the driveway and the detached garage. It's also to add a small den to the left, or to the right rather, of the kitchen and breakfast area to get a bit better of a connection on the first floor public spaces for the family as they use the house. We're seeking variances for minimum rear yard setback and minimum accessory structure in the required front yard. Both variances, in my opinion, are from hardships on the lot. If you'll see on the site plan, almost the entire house is outside of the footprint of the setback lines. We're not exactly sure where or how that happened, if there were at some point two lots there that became combined into one, but for whatever reason, the house is where it is. And almost any addition in the area that we're looking to add to in the back would trigger these variances, just because the house already exists outside of the setbacks, primarily on the Llewellyn Road front yard, and on the left, what's actually the side yard, but is the rear due to the corner lot definition.
Mr. McCulloch, do you have any questions?
No, not right now. I'm going to ask questions after. Thank you.
Mr. Caulfield?
No questions yet.
Ms. Harris?
So the planner's report says that you're seeking relief for variance that accessory structures are not permitted to be located between the dwelling and Harrison Avenue. Is it just the AC condensers?
It's a replacement of one AC condenser, an additional condenser that we think will probably be required by the HVAC work required for the addition of the house. And we also would like to add a generator in that same location. And the reason we're looking to put those in that location is so that they're not so viewable from the back patio, that they're more on the side of the house. The basement mechanical room is directly adjacent to the location we're showing them, to make the ducting and piping all work well. And it's a good location for screening all of those units. There's a fence that already exists. We would have additional landscape screening. And although it's in the required front yard, I do want to just mention that it's set behind the front plane of the house. So even though it's in the Llewellyn Road front yard, it's still behind the front facade of the house. So it's not as if we have equipment that's in front of the house. It's very much on the side when you're looking at the house from Llewellyn Road, but because of the positioning of the existing house, it requires a front yard setback.
Okay, and so the new addition is not in that setback at all?
The new addition is encroaching into the required rear yard setback, which is technically the left side of the lot when you're looking at our site plan.
So this memorandum tries to explain this quandary in this corner lot where the corner lot, I included in the memo some of the definitions and ordinances that try to set up a corner lot yard orientation. And so the rear yard of this property by definition or by ordinance is actually opposite Harrison Avenue. The house happens to be located in that area. If you were to build a new home on this lot, it would be pulled away from where the current home is more towards the center of the lot. So that's why it needs a variance. And you can see the plan has some lightly dotted outline that shows where the buildable area is and where the addition is. So it's a rear yard variance for the addition, and the variance for the location of this equipment, the mechanical equipment, is because it is located between the house and Harrison Avenue. It has nothing to do with Llewellyn Road in this case.
And is that because Harrison Avenue is supposed to be?
Well, on a corner lot, also by definition and ordinance, I think I even added the bullet point in there. It says that there's a front yard on both street sides. So then going further, accessory structures, which there's a lot of, for example, you mentioned an existing condenser. This application of that ordinance, I think, in the 80s and the 90s, I'm pretty certain the township didn't view condensers that way, so you'll see them pre-existing a lot. I recall starting about 20 years ago when I started working here, they wanted to start to include those as accessories. So locating that equipment now, the existing one is grandfathered, but the additional equipment between the house and Harrison Avenue is a variance simply because of its location, regardless of the distance, which is in this case a great distance, which might mitigate that. But I suppose the ordinance has a sense of visibility aspects to that, which, unlike the previous memos from the planners, I didn't add any photographs, and these plans don't include photographs like the prior architect, so I'm not sure. You might have just explained what the view from Harrison Ave of this equipment, or even Llewellyn Road, even though that's not a variance, what it's like, you know?
Yeah, so Harrison Ave is actually very well screened with evergreen trees along the right side of the property. And along Llewellyn Road, there's a fence and dense shrubbery. It's not the same height trees, but it is evergreen shrubbery. And all of that is out in front of the equipment, existing and proposed. So there's really no view of the equipment from either across the street on Llewellyn or as you're passing by on Harrison.
You know, you can't see the condenser from the street, whether it is from Harrison or from Llewellyn.
Sure.
And so the landscape screening that's shown on the plan, that's existing to remain, or are you adding anything additional?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Church, do you have any, Mr. Moore, do you have any questions?
Have you done any sound tests in regards to the additional AC units and generator?
We don't have any specifications on the actual units yet. I mean, the generator will only be on in the event of an emergency. The condensers themselves, if it's of the board's concern, we can look at models that are kind of low volume, low output, things of that nature if needed.
The only comment I would make is the existing condenser is 25 years old, and it is incredibly loud today, and I guarantee you that any condenser we put in, it will be considerably quieter than what it is today.
Yeah, I think that it would be important to take into consideration your neighbors
Yeah.
and the noise, so that it doesn't, it's not disruptive.
Sure.
Just
Understood.
infringing on their, peaceful enjoyment.
And it should be noted that these units are about 90 feet away from any property line and probably further from any nearby house, considering the additional street distance. It's about as far as it can get from a distance point of view.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the planner's report, there's mention of net increase in the impervious surfaces. Can you walk us through those changes?
Yeah, so if you look, probably sheet V1 would be the best to look at, that I can go through. The increase is relatively de minimis. It's under the threshold from which any kind of grading plan or stormwater management would be necessitated. The main increases are due to, if you look on the proposed site plan, the piece of the addition that's got the diagonal hatching over it, those are the new pieces of the first floor, the addition, and the increase to the impervious coverage is mostly due to sliding the patio over a bit. So we're really not increasing the size of the patio that the Overdorffs currently have. We're just rebuilding a new one in a slightly shifted location that goes a little bit further towards Harrison Ave due to the addition of the den on the first floor. And then there's a very small amount of impervious increase where the mudroom addition is. So all of those pieces combined together, the new patio and the two pieces of the first floor addition, minus what's already existing paved by the existing patio, results in the net increase that we have stated on our narrative for impervious surface.
Great, thank you. And you can confirm that it's below the threshold for the ordinance, right? 250 feet of net change, it's below that.
Yeah, we're about, even with the proposed, we're about 12% below the allowable for this lot.
Okay, thank you.
Question. Are you putting these AC unit condensers and generator on top of any types of like blocks, or in case we have a lot of rain? And
Probably
have you taken
just
that into
a
account?
concrete pad that might be about 4 inches above the rough grade around it, but not any kind of platform necessarily.
Well, as we've been seeing, climate change it's a real thing, and we've been having a lot of torrential storms lately, so.
Yeah, it's a good point. We're always trying to just mitigate, how much bulk are we creating visually for the town by asking for these variances, while also trying to keep it, so that it's proofed for the owner. If we were to go up on stilts, we'd have a concern about, how does that, and it's not really well screened by the landscaping anymore.
There's
so.
also
Well,
a
nothing
living room.
dramatic.
Yeah.
There's
but-
also a living room window on that side of the house, and the condensers are right. They're basically below that window, and so any sort of like platform of a certain height is going to make the condenser visible through the side window.
Right. But you do want it to be functionable
No, I
in the
mean-
event of a storm. So
Yeah.
I'm just,
And where it is today is, so to be clear too, the condenser sits on top of an area that is landscaped in a way where there's basically it's like a rock bed effectively for drainage purposes. So it sits right next to a rock bed, and so the house sort of like drains away from that area of the house pretty nicely. We don't have any water issues on that side of the house.
Yeah, the grading is kind of bermed
Yes.
slightly up to the platforms of the existing
Away from the
condenser.
house.
Exactly.
Away from the house, and then also just up from the rest of the yard towards Harrison Ave, so hopefully we'll be okay. But it's a good point.
Okay, just couple of annoying questions, and I guess, the existing condenser is certainly well screened, and, and we finally broke down and actually installed one last year, and I've been pleasantly surprised that even when I'm 2 feet away from it, I can barely hear it. So it's not a noise issue, it's just a general accessory, and I'm going to deal with the generator as, but, you know, did you consider locating what I'll call the second condenser here where the addition is? I guess part of what I'm concerned and trying to understand is the, you know, frequently when we have these people want, you know, when it's a large house, they want to serve different portions of the house, and, you know, and did you look at putting the second condenser near where the addition is, where it would be in a conforming location?
We hadn't really looked at it. I mean, I had thought about it, but just considering that the mechanical room in the basement is already directly to the left of where they're shown on that sort of front right corner of the house, we just assumed we would load the equipment in that spot where the one is already. And just from a use perspective of the rear yard, we tried to not have to have an area screened out for mechanical equipment that you don't want to look at necessarily while you're sitting in the patio or looking out the window from the new den.
And did that same logic apply to the generator?
For the most part, I mean, the generator, we have a limitation as well on how far away from the house we can put it effectively. So we're just trying to get the mechanical equipment in the area of the yard that's not used really by people or guests.
And I guess, you know, I agree that, you know, currently this is not visible from Harrison Avenue, but that's presupposing that existing vegetation. Would you be adverse to adding vegetation, you know, like right in front of the units? I mean, not literally right in
There
front.
actually is now. So there's a very large rhododendron that is at the very left corner of the house.
Right, and as, in terms of from Llewellyn Road, that's fine, but from Harrison Avenue, I didn't see anything, but.
There's all of Harrison is lined with evergreens.
Right, but if they'll eventually die and just something more immediately in front of them, I didn't see anything there. I saw the rhododendron between Llewellyn and the existing unit, which very effectively screens it.
Yeah. There's
I mean,
no
we
other
don't-
plans, and the house is also fairly well landscaped now, both from both sides. In addition to, it's kind of weird to explain, but on Llewellyn, the first, let's say, 100, maybe 70 feet of the yard is actually tree lined on the Llewellyn side as well, with shrubs and trees and evergreens. So that's all there too, and so
I'm totally good on the Llewellyn side.
I thought you were talking about the Llewellyn side.
No, no, the Harrison Avenue side, where there seems to be a fairly large, yes, you have the screening right along Harrison Avenue, but, you know, over time, that'll go away, and, you know, more effective if you have something, you know, close to right in front on either side of the path that you have going around to where the new patio is going to be.
Yeah, I mean, we could, if it's a condition. We don't have a landscape plan developed yet. You know, we do have to maintain minimum clearances around the equipment.
Right, I
for
understand you can't put it right in front of it.
access and servicing, but we could add additional, I mean, I guess my answer to that question would be another question. Well, why wouldn't we just upkeep the evergreens that are on Harrison if they're there and functioning? You know, they're very manicured. It's very equally spaced. I think there would just be a good intent to keep them and provide good screening to the property from Harrison.
What about
For noise as well. You know, the evergreens also serve a barrier for the.
what about a potential condition that if the landscaping on Harrison was ever to go away for whatever reason, that it be provided elsewhere on a continuous, you know, whether it's at Harrison Avenue or nearer to the units, something that's continuous one way or another.
Sure, yeah.
I'm just, that the condition will come from the chairman, but.
Okay. But it does, I mean, just looking at your site plan, that there's sufficient space between the condensers and the generator and the walkway. I mean, it's not like they're close, right? So.
There's plenty of room.
And then based on the design of the property and the patio and your reference to entertaining, presumably, and since you don't have a walkway from the driveway going across the front on Llewellyn Road, I mean, for people to access from the driveway, they'd have to go all the way to the back of the driveway, right? Because that's where the walkway is.
You can access the yard from either direction.
Yeah, I mean, no, what I'm saying is, yeah, from Llewellyn Road, you can access the walkway from the road itself,
Yes.
right? But if people were parking in the driveway, they would have to go, if they were using the walkway, they would have to go all the way to the back of in order to come around. So presumably, the design is for when you're entertaining, people to use the walkway and to make their way around to the patio if that's where you're entertaining, let's say. So probably covering that equipment is a good thing, because unless you want to brag that you have a generator and condensers, there's no real reason for them to be exposed if you easily can cover them.
Sure.
I mean, we
There is a I don't know what kind of tree it is. There is beside directly. So if the after you go from the rhododendron, then you have the fence, then you have the condenser. There is another tree that is directly behind the condenser. That is, I don't know what type of tree it is. I apologize. I should know. But there is a tree there that is a low height, low limb hanging tree that sits there that comes off the side of the house. So when you are in the backyard, you can't really see the condenser from that angle. The only place you can see it is if you walk directly on the path and you're looking at it from the left side of the house, you can see it directly. But you have to get within 10 feet of it to see it.
And just looking at the photos that were submitted, you do have a photo of that side of the house with the condenser. All of the trees that are shown are going to remain?
Yes, that's the plan.
Okay.
Any other questions from members of the board? Are there any members of the audience who are in hiding who have questions or testimony or any comments on the application? Okay, is there anything further either of you want to add before we discuss and vote on the application?
No.
Okay, we'll start discussion with Mr. Caulfield.
I'm in favor of this application, and I'm going to throw the condition of, let's put some screening around those ECs. Thanks.
Ms. Harris?
I'm in favor of both setbacks. I think this is a very kind of oddly shaped property with oddly shaped setback requirements, and I don't think that they are going beyond the setbacks too much, either the front or the rear yard setback, so I'm in favor.
Mr. Church?
I'm also in favor. I'm in favor of the application. It's a nice-looking lot, and it is odd-shaped, and where the house is and everything. But yeah, I'm in favor. I'll be in favor of this application.
Mr. Moore?
I'm in favor of the application, and I think that it'll be a very nice addition into your home.
Thank you.
Mr. Vieira?
I'm also in favor of the application.
Mr. McCulloch?
Yeah, I'm also in favor of the application. Do you have a dog?
We do.
You do. So
We have two.
I walk by your property a lot, and your dog surprises me quite often.
Yes, she does that.
And so I would say
apologize.
that your evergreen is quite effective, actually, because I never see the dog coming.
Yeah.
But
No, you're not the only neighbor that has said the dog that she scares people because she comes out of nowhere and you can't see her. I apologize.
But yeah, I support the application. But I do think that the screening would be helpful. I don't think it has to be trees, but I think something modest would probably be a good thing.
I have a neighbor with a picket fence, and you can't really see where the dog is until you're right in front of it, because it's just solid until you get there. Yeah.
I guess the dog's doing its job, right?
Yeah, she's all bark no bite, but she she has. She's funny. She just has a very loud bark for a small dog. She's only 40 pounds, so she's not big.
I can testify that she's a very good dog.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard her before.
Okay. I'm also in favor of the application. I think given the existing location of the house on the lot and the way the setbacks apply, there's no practical way for them to do an addition that would be totally conforming, so I have no problem with the house variance. I think given where the existing condenser is located and, again, some practical realities in terms of where the house is located, in favor of granting the front yard variance for that. I do think, we should, that the condensers and the generator be adequately landscaped so they're not visible from either Harrison Avenue or Llewellyn Road, and that the generator, I'm trying to remember what we've done with other generators, but I think it's it can only be tested between 10 and 5, Monday through Friday, just so you're not deciding to test it at 3 o'clock on a Saturday morning and really excite your neighbors more than the dog does. Okay, any further discussion on the board? And if not, would someone like to make a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept this application.
It's with a condition.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, any abstentions? And the motion to adjourn, we'll see you on November 15th.
Is that the date? I didn't even check that.
We're not meeting November 1st because we don't have applications, and I'll be before the Union
We'll cancel
Board
that,
of
yeah, so
Adjustment.
November 15th it is.
And motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you, board.